What was the biggest shock for you when you escaped poverty? I think the biggest shock for me was when I realized that if I ran out of milk or bread, I could just go get more. I didn't have to wait for a month to be able to afford it. Also, going on vacations out of state. We could never afford that while growing up. People sending their kids to summer camps and paying for music lessons, sport lessons, and private tutoring. I never had music lessons growing up because we couldn't afford it. Never learned how to swim, never went to summer camp. Never did anything interesting. Now my kids have all of those things, and it just seems like they're so privileged to have these opportunities to learn so much cool stuff and have so many great experiences. Before we had a computer and the school teacher required us to submit a paper, my classmates would hand in their papers printed out. As for me, I'd have to write down the paper, but because I have poor handwriting, I would ask my older sister to handwrite my paper neatly. And the first time we bought a computer, which came with a free printer, I was really excited to make school assignments. It was overwhelming, really, to know that you can write your paper on a keyboard, format it and then print it, and then there's word art. Even if it's not encouraged, I typed the titles of my papers in word art. My friends thought it was funny, but I didn't care. It was word art! It probably sounds strange, but buying things. I'm so used to saving and not having that I forget that I can afford a new pair of glasses if I break my old ones. After being in a position of poverty, you learn to deal with stuff that most people would view as inconvenient. I've been teased on a few occasions because I'll go without stuff even though I can get things for myself now that I'm an adult. Spending guilt and the feeling that economic doom is pending above your head if you make the smallest of purchases. I know that feeling, and it's pretty difficult to get out of the cycle. The way people talk. Just hearing people talk about things like drinking green tea and how they bought new kitchen countertops this weekend and casually dropping stuff like, "that time I was in Thailand," seems silly. But at first, it was weird hearing people talk like the people on TV. I also realized I have an absolutely filthy mouth. I didn't realize the way I talked was so bad, but I'm by far the most inappropriate person in my workplace. I think there are levels to the whole TV thing, though. I had a very comfortable upbringing, and the amount of times that a character on something like Modern Family would do something supposedly normal but unbearably expensive to my mind was very telling about how out of touch some TV writers are. When I got my big break and landed my first comfortable salary job after being in poverty all my life, the whole spending money concept was literally blowing my mind. I'd become so used to only buying the bare essentials and spending an absolute minimum on myself that buying things was basically a foreign concept to me. For a while at my new job, I pretty much didn't change my spending habits at all in any way, shape, or form. One day, a friend of mine pretty much called me out on this, being like, "You work hard for your money. You should spend some of it on yourself. Reward yourself." The statement really made me think. I went to the store where I ended up buying some much-needed new clothes and various other things I needed around my apartment. After returning home, I panicked and checked my bank account to see what kind of horrible mistake I'd just made. I looked at the number and finally made the realization, that really wasn't that big of a deal. I guess this is what it's like to have money. Not even when I got out, but while in school, it blew my mind that other kids actually got clothes more than once or twice a year. I only got some for my birthday, sometimes, and before school started in September. I'm right there with you. I never asked for anything because I knew on some level that we couldn't afford it. I remember being shocked that my father said I should get a new dress for my first homecoming dance when I'd just gotten school clothes. My family was quite poor when I was a young child. We were never homeless, but we did sometimes skip a meal or two, maybe live without electricity or running water for a while. I got used to that lifestyle and I took care of things I had and learned to repair things that were broken. I joined the military after high school and I couldn't believe all of the people my age who'd waste food or throw away things that weren't even broken. I also found it quite amusing when the barracks had no hot water or heat. Many people lost their minds. My family was only kind of poor, but it still boggles my mind the amount of food and useful things other people throw out. My ex seemed to purposefully leave a few bites of food or the last few sips of a drink to throw out, and it drove me crazy. Even though I'm more than comfortable financially now, I still grab things that I think I can fix up out of the trash. Going from every dollar being important to fairly cost-insensitive is a big change. It's great not to sweat meals out or worry about bills and being able to save fairly large sums for investments or major purchases. It's nice to be able to buy the nicer things that will last instead of the crappiest version of everything and needing to replace lots of crap and always wishing I could upgrade. It's nice having a frame for my bed, an apartment of my own, and not having to go to a laundromat. It's fantastic that I can help my family and give them gifts or money to pay for stuff when we hang out. It's just nice. People who tell you money isn't important have either always had it or never had it. It's pretty frickin' important, guys. How delicious vegetables are. We never had fresh produce growing up. Maybe canned if it was donated to the church, but even that was rare. Hearing people complain about how they don't like vegetables blows my mind. When you're so used to eating everything preservative-laden or on the verge of going bad, fresh food tastes amazing. Having a frickin' car, man. Seriously, you have no idea how good it feels to just be able to go wherever you want, whenever you want, and not bum rides off friends, family, and public transport. Most children fantasize about this and receive the same culture shock when they're teens, but imagine not having a car for half your adult life and still having a job and having to go to college. It's frickin' nice to have a car that I paid for with my hard-earned money. Always having food in the house. I'm blown away that at any point I can make myself something with fresh ingredients. I still eat lettuce that's almost on its way out and dairy that's past its expiry dates, though. I grew up in a relatively poor town. Then I ended up going to a private college on a scholarship, and people actually have nice parents who they want to spend time with. Whoa. I relate to this really hard. I was floored to hear people complain about their parents at times. Their parents would come into town for the weekend, and while there to do stuff with my friends, their kids, they'd just invite me along. Like, they'd take us all out to dinner, often to really nice restaurants. And I always felt weird whispering under my breath to my friend how expensive I could go with my meal, and get this weird look and being told to get whatever I wanted. I remember when I was a kid not being allowed to have certain friends over because they ate too much at dinner, or all the spending money my friends got, or the care packages of stuff, including homemade cookies and stuff like that. And they'd talk about how annoying their parents were. I was always so confused. Clothes. The fact that people actually spend hundreds of dollars on clothes. For one shirt, they're willing to shell out $80, which is the monetary equivalent of 8 meals at McDonald's or 2 weeks' worth of groceries. As a side note, when I was younger, we'd go to thrift shops to buy clothes. About 2008 or 9 came around, it was suddenly cool to buy clothes at thrift shops. I'm guessing it still is. It kind of upset me once I realized it was finally cool to buy hand-me-downs because back then, I'd lie to the other kids my age when they asked what store I got my clothes from because I was so ashamed that they were from the Goodwill. I never had the luxury of buying a shirt for $80, and I'll never spend that money on a shirt even if I had all the money in the world. It's such an extravagance. I grew up middle class and I can't even justify spending $80 on a shirt. I feel guilty when I buy a single $16 dress at Target. How fast and how blind you become to the plight of those who are still poor. It's like that world becomes invisible to you. I'm not rich, but I managed to get by and I own some real estate. Going to the dentist is a no-brainer for me. I just make the appointment and pay the bill without giving it any thought. Recently, having had a chat with a single mum on almost minimum wage, she has education and works for the government, not McDonald's, which makes it even more sad somehow, she was scraping together money cent by cent to get a tooth pulled out. There was no money to repair it and it was gone beyond repair. Then I realized, I'm blind. It doesn't matter that I had days in my youth where I had no food. I'm still blind. That makes me completely paranoid about politicians. I don't really think they're aware of things that they're blind to, and the fact that some politicians wave their meager and poor background around like some sort of vaccine against criticisms about their blindness no longer has any value to me. Yeah, our ability to forget how to live cheaply is really something else. I've been on the verge of homelessness at least once in my life, and I have to tell you that even when I try to really cut back on my expenses, I still think I feed myself for about 3 times the amount I did in my leaner years. And I honestly think I've repressed the memories of how hard it could get back then sometimes. That other kids ate regularly, needed to bathe, and come home each night. The other families in my neighborhood were all in the same boat, moving all the time, new neighbors continuously, rent late, no power. I lucked out. My dad saved up for a private investigator, got custody of his 3 kids, 7, 9, and 11, and suddenly we had to go to school, wear real clothes, not just a dirty shirt and no shoes. We had dinner together. It was a change I'll never forget. A sad story I learned through chance, almost 10 years after the worst of it. I met a stranger who, back when I lived with my mum, would bathe me, feed me, and dress me in her son's clothes. I'm female, by the way, when I was 6. Awkward. I opened the door. She's my boyfriend's friend's mum. No recollection of her on my part. And then she just started bawling. "Paulina, is that you? I'd dress you, send you out into the world again, feed you. I always hoped you'd make it." I'm in my 50s, so this dates me a little. My mother always switched price tags when we shopped. This was before barcode scanning. I thought it was normal and I did it myself until I found out it was illegal while in my early teens. Also, a huge culture shock was how wasteful the world can be. We used everything until it was absolutely useless, and throwing away food was a sin. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I realized rich people do substances for fun, while my mates from deprived backgrounds do them to run away from sorrows and reality. In poverty, the definition of rich is anyone not completely poor. Your parents' car isn't 15 years old? The paint is actually glossy and not peeled and matte? None of your utilities are off? You're rich. That's how it was when I grew up. You call so many people rich when truly they are not, and they have problems of their own. Wow, a question I can answer. My biggest shock has been watching people who grew up with financial stability talk to their kids about money. Money for me as a kid was something to cause anxiety. We never had enough. Not enough to eat, not enough to pay the bills, not enough to, well, live, really. When I see my friends with their kids now, we all make more than a decent living. Their relationship with money is so strategic and thoughtful. How am I going to make the most out of what I have? How to show my kids how to come out ahead and make good financial choices? These weren't the lessons that I learned. Mine were based around collecting things for safety. If I could afford this now, or even if I can't, can I get it now? And could I sell it if something goes wrong? I still find myself fighting the urge to buy my kids everything, because I could. Not literally anything, of course. But it doesn't even matter to them. I realize I'm not buying them stuff. I'm buying stuff for little anxious me. It hasn't been as much of a culture shock as it's been a slow, steady climb up. I've had plenty of time to acclimate. It's more like a series of pleasant surprises for me. Doing things that cost a lot up front yet save money in the long run is a nice feeling. Like a trip to Costco, for example. I can buy $200 worth of chicken, veggies, and stuff like that instead of just eating the dollar menu at McDonald's every day. Being able to afford an Xbox One and have furniture that matches is a fun perk as well. I can just buy a video game whenever I want. And I can have fast food whenever I want. I can wear clothes that fit me. I can just do things because I want to do them. I have no idea why it was such a foreign concept to me. I guess I never realized that it was even possible. Blew my mind one day when my buddy was like, "Hey, let's go watch a movie in the city." And I could actually say, "Yeah, let's do that. Let's just drive 20 minutes on a whim, get dinner and watch a movie." Biggest shock of growing up for me, honestly. Having a fridge and pantry full of food that I like never gets old. Growing up, there wasn't much to eat and it was mostly crap. It's been at least a decade since I lived like that, but I still open up my pantry and marvel at all the treats and options. There's really nothing like being well-nourished. Let's just say whoever said money can't buy happiness never had to make toast on a coat hanger over a fire made from borrowed bread served plain. Buying food has been the biggest to me. I remember being at the grocery with my well-off friend that I was visiting for the weekend. I was about 19 at the time. We were shopping for things to make for dinners, and he always paid for groceries, so I liked to cook to feel like I was contributing. I remember we were picking out vegetables for some recipe, and I went to grab Roma tomatoes which were priced by the pound. So without thinking too much, I grabbed some tomatoes, walked over to the scale and measured out as close to 1 pound of tomatoes as I could. As I was walking back to him and the cart, I guess I had a look on my face. So he asks me what's up, and I said, "I'm not sure if this is going to be enough tomatoes for the recipe." So he flatly says, "Well, then get more." That caught me off guard, and I started to get into the, "But this is a pound of," and he cuts me off and says, "If you think we need more, then get more." It seems like such a simple, obvious thing, but it was a very different view and life than I was accustomed to. Now, years later, with my own career and place and family, I don't even buy things based on unit. When I grocery shop, I buy how much I think we'll need, and it's a huge privilege to be able to shop that way. To keep things under control, we make a menu before we shop for the week so we know exactly what we need for our meals. That helps a lot when you grow up poor, and now have the ability to see something you like and get it without considering if it's going to impact something else like the electrical bill, or gas, or rent. Oh, and bread. Bread is probably the most noticeable thing that I splurge on. No more random brand $1 loaves for us anymore. I head straight to the Brownberry stuff, either honey wheat or buttermilk. I'm completely okay with spending $3 for a loaf of that, $2.50 when it's on sale. In short, grocery shopping was the biggest shock and change. That places like Red Lobster and Outback Steakhouse aren't places you dress up to go to. I was out on a date with the guy who'd eventually become my husband. We were starting to get hungry and he suggested grabbing food and brought up Red Lobster. I told him I wasn't sure, I wasn't dressed well enough for it. He sort of boggled at me and said I was fine. I went in and I was so self-conscious. Until I saw that there were guys eating there that looked like they'd walked straight off a construction site. I'm still getting used to being okay buying stuff for myself, especially frivolities like clothes and makeup. I used to like to go to the mall to window shop. It still irritates my husband when I see something I like, go up to it and say something like, "Hey, they have this in my size. And wow, the price is really reasonable. I'd love to wear this at insert event or place." Then I turn and walk away. It seems to be a struggle for him to convince me that I can in fact buy clothes that cost more than $15. As an uninformed foreigner, I also assumed that a place that served lobster on a regular basis was upmarket and dressy too. But then again, I guess it's a massive chain and shellfish are bottom feeders, so serving a cheaper variety of them isn't out of the question. That your shoes are supposed to match your outfit. This may be more of a lady thing, but I got teased all of the time for my mismatched shoes when I first started working in a nice office. When I was a kid, I had one pair of shoes and one roll of duct tape. The end. I didn't grow up in actual poverty. My family has never been below the poverty line technically, but I've always been pretty solidly lower middle class at best. Most of my independent adult life was spent living paycheck to paycheck on a cashier's wage. I'm nearly 30 and I only just got my driver's license within the last year. I never got it before because I could never even come close to affording a car. Some friends in another state made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. Quit your crappy retail job and come move into our spare room. We won't charge you rent, just help out around the house while you find part-time work and get back to school. Since my living situation before had been such that going back to school wasn't possible, I had to work every hour I possibly could to stay financially solvent, this seemed like a great deal. And it is a great deal. I've been living with these fine folk for almost 2 years and I'm finally starting to make something of my life. They both make good money. I don't know their exact income, but I know that combined they bring in 6 figures every year. For comparison, I grew up in a single-income home. My dad works for the state and after over 20 years with them, he barely makes $50K a year. I'm still getting used to the differences between how they live and how I grew up. They have house cleaners come in every other week. I try not to be in the house when they come because I still can't feel comfortable just sitting around the house while someone else does the cleaning. Their daughter graduated high school and was getting ready to move away for college, so they decided she needed a better car. Not for appearances or anything. Her old car was, well, old, a 1993 Volvo station wagon, and they wanted something a bit more reliable for her to drive from the Bay Area to San Diego. After looking at used cars of the specs they wanted, they decided it would make more sense to just buy her a brand new car. Nobody in my family has ever bought a brand new car. They don't stock up on bread. My mum will buy 6 or 7 loaves of bread when there's a good sale on and stick the extras in the freezer. The people I live with not only don't do that, they don't even keep their bread in the fridge. I have yet to actually see a loaf of bread get finished in this house because it gets moldy within 1 week due to it sitting out at room temperature, which, this being the East Bay, tends to be pretty warm. When the mold inevitably appears, they just toss the usually barely half-finished loaf and go buy a new one. Speaking of cars, that 93 Volvo is what I currently drive. It's a pretty solid car, I just wouldn't entirely trust it for a truly long trip. I doubt I'll ever drive it back home to Oregon. We haven't done the paperwork yet, but they've made it plain that they're pretty much just going to give the car to me. That's what really blows my mind, that they can look at a functional, well-running car, even one that's 22 years old, and figure it's not a problem to just give it away for free. What shocked me, and continues to shock me, is how little interest the people around me have in wanting to help others. When I was poor, the family friends were always helping each other, and when we had any extra money, we'd buy new school supplies for the poorer kid across the street. Our neighbors donated food and clothes to the church drives. Now I'm surrounded by people with lots of disposable income, and they just go out to nice restaurants every day and buy all the new tech gadgets. None of my coworkers donate to anything or volunteer for anything. It's crazy to see all this money and no desire to help anyone. I guess since they were never in need themselves, they can't picture what just donating $100 worth of toiletry supplies to the local women's shelter can do for people, or what donating toys regularly to the refugee center can do for those kids who have nothing. Nice shirts. I seem to have a thing for really nice shirts. And silk ones. I love silk shirts. I work in an industrial facility. Work boots, jeans, and silk shirts. Yes, I catch hell for it. It makes me feel good, so I indulge myself. How little people understand poverty, that they don't seem to realize it isn't the fault of the poor, that it's an entirely different way of thinking and existing, that no one cares about you, not the government, nor any of its schemes actually give a damn about helping the poor. How disheartening it is to be the scum of the earth because of something you can't control.
People who have accidentally caused the death of another person. What happened? When I was around 4, I was inappropriately touched by my cousin who was babysitting me. I told on her, and she took her own life. I posted this before in more detail, but the truncated version is when I was 16 years old, I hit an 87-year-old man after he ran a stop sign. I was with him holding his hand when he died on the sidewalk. He had a heart attack. They weren't able to determine if he had the heart attack before the accident, which would explain why he blew through the stop sign, or if he had one as a result. His family was very gracious, and I am very grateful for them. His son called me the day after it happened, and told me his mom had died 6 months prior. His dad had been very depressed, and while they were sad he died this way, they were happy to think their parents were reunited. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to having been a victim of CSA by her grandpa and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinners due to the SA. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters and cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been inappropriately touched too. After word got back to grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and grandpa is dead. Apparently grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking and grandma messed with the dosage which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause and nothing ever happened to grandma. It was my mother-in-law's birthday and her daughter and son-in-law had dinner for the event at their place. My wife, 3 kids, and I drove out after work. As we pulled up to their cul-de-sac home in the dark, I saw something odd in the grass between the sidewalk and street near their mailbox. When I got out, an old man, about 80 years old, called over to me asking if I wouldn't mind helping him up. Said he had been out for a walk, stumbled, and been in that spot for about 45 minutes. My wife and daughters went inside the house. My then 12-year-old son stayed with me while I helped the man up. Wonderful guy, started saying this was the icing on the cake for his day, as he had fallen asleep early afternoon on his couch with a lit cigarette, which caught the couch on fire. Fire department came, put the fire out with little damage, and moved the couch to the curb when they were done. By this time, my brother-in-law had come outside with us. We walked the man back to his house about 5 doors down. During our trip there, he regaled us with stories of him in the Navy during the war, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember which war he had said. He made special not to talk to my son about how wonderful it was that he was helping. Introduced himself to us as Bill, said he was the last unpaid bill. Thought that was pretty clever. As we made to leave, he asked if we would bring his couch from the curb back up to the house for him. Not sure why he wanted it, didn't ask. So my brother-in-law and I moved the couch and set it next to the house outside of his garage. We wished Bill well, then headed back to the house for dinner. When I got in, I noticed that my shirt smelled of burnt plastic. Brother-in-law gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and we had a great birthday celebration before I and the family left about 2 hours later for home. Around 2:30 the next morning, our phone rang. My wife answered, and I pretended to be more asleep than I actually was so I didn't have to deal with the bad phone call in the wee early hours. They're very seldom about good things. It was the police department from the town my brother-in-law and sister-in-law lived in. They asked me questions about my activities the previous evening while I was at their house. The couch reignited and burned Bill's house down, killing him in the process. The police grilled my brother-in-law, examined his arms, then called me. I don't think I slept well for over a month afterwards and couldn't get the tragedy out of my head for a long time. I should have known from the smell on my clothes that it wasn't safe to move that couch. I should have put the pieces together, but I was just too interested in getting back to my family to celebrate. Nothing more ever came of it, but I'll never get rid of the knowledge that if I hadn't committed to one simple action that I performed, then another human being would not have died. I was relieved when my sister-in-law and brother-in-law moved a couple of years later because I hated seeing that empty lot every time I went to their house. This was maybe 11 years ago, but to this day, about once a year around my mother-in-law's birthday, my brother-in-law and I still have a toast to the last unpaid bill. Turned left into my sister's driveway at 3 a.m. A guy on a Harley was doing 60 miles per hour in a 30 with no headlight. My half-ton pickup left 4 feet of skid marks from being pushed back by the force. I still remember seeing him do mid-air somersaults. This was 1976. Dang, that guy was fully responsible for his own death. You just happened to be there. Lucky he didn't take you with him. It's a shame, but double the speed limit in the middle of the night with no lights? 100% his fault. War survivor from Chechnya 94 to 96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17 years old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, "Run out, the roof is gonna fall," and she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope at least. I was supposed to meet a friend ahead to soccer practice, but he wasn't there when I got to where we were supposed to meet. I got impatient and decided to head to practice myself. He never got there, so I assumed he was sick or something. 2 days later, my mom told me he got hit by a car and died after running out in the street to get a ball he was kicking while waiting for me. The timing of things seems like if I had waited just a minute longer, he wouldn't have had to wait for me and would have lived. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the streetlights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between two crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him lying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911, but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with this strange device that I later found out was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up and I finally saw my car with the flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges. Also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their own investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked third shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling the worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. I'm at least partially responsible for 3 deaths. So I'm a weather forecaster. A few years ago, I was forecasting for Afghanistan. Now, we were doing these forecasts from a base in the States, which means we had to coordinate our forecast with someone who was deployed to Afghanistan. Sometimes the downrange forecaster was really experienced, other times they weren't. It was a mixed bag. Anyway, I had been forecasting for at least 2 years before this incident. I was familiar with it, and I was actually in a supervisory capacity, simply overseeing all of the forecasts going out in my zone. Well, one day, I was talking with one of my forecasters about the potential for large hail and how I'd like him to put that in his forecast. Now that's a big thing to put in a forecast because of how operationally significant this is. Aircraft must be put in hangars, missions are canceled, assets must be protected, etc. So when it came time to discuss this with the downrange forecaster, he was absolutely against it. He didn't want to brief that to the commander because again, missions have to be canceled based on what you think will happen. If you're wrong, you've set back a lot of people and wasted a lot of time. So the deployed forecaster tries to argue against it, but his reasoning really just boiled down to, I don't want to brief that. So when I wasn't looking, he essentially just pulled rank on my junior forecaster and forced him to take it out of the forecast. And so we went out to the base with no hail in it, only hinting at some vicinity thunderstorms. Well, when I noticed, I was furious, but I said screw it, we'll let him be wrong. This was the first time I'd ever wanted to put large hail in a forecast. Maybe we were over-forecasting it. Nope. Basically, right on schedule, a huge thunderstorm popped up and dumped large hail on the base. It did a few million in damage to aircraft, injured a helipilot who was pre-flighting his bird, and killed 3 Afghan National Army soldiers who had left on a patrol and couldn't find any cover. They wound up beaten to death by hail. That has always bugged me. They didn't need to die. We knew the potential was there, and I basically just let an incorrect forecast go out that got them killed. 3 lanes wide on my side of the street. I am in the lane closest to the middle of the street. I just get through an intersection and see a car attempting to turn in front of me into a gas station. This gas station entrance is close enough to the intersection I just went through that there is no middle section for them to wait in to turn when it is clear. They inch into my lane across a double yellow line and stop. I quickly get over to my right, one lane. They inch over into the next lane and stop again. I start to panic. Why are they stopping? What is he doing? I quickly see I can get in the far right lane and move over. This older man driving, I think he panicked. He tries to gas it past me into the gas station. I'm in a Dodge Dakota and they're in an old Chevy truck with rack seating. I slow down as much as I can, but there is no time. I T-bone them and my car basically slams them into a concrete pole. I stop a couple of feet from a concrete wall myself. I get out of the car with my adrenaline on full. I'm not even sure if I'm hurt or not. I can't feel anything anyway. I stumble over to their car to see if they're okay. The looks I received from this old man and his wife still haunt me to this day. They looked at me like I was the Grim Reaper coming to claim them. Absolute horror. Blood coming down their face, wondering why I did this to them as smoke from the front of their car looms over them like creeping death. The woman died later that day from her injuries at the local hospital. The man later tried to sue me, but I was cleared of any legal wrongdoing based on the investigation that had taken place. They had concluded that I had done everything I could have done to avoid a collision. It was just unfortunate timing that this older gentleman made an illegal driving decision. A decision I am sure he regretted until the end of his days. I'm still messed up from this even though it was years and years ago. Getting cleared legally does nothing for one's own conscience and psyche. My vehicle, whether it was intentional or not, was used as an instrument of destruction that ended up killing a man's wife. I have PTSD flashbacks. If I drive by a similar looking area that looks similar to the accident site, I still get such crippling anxiety that I have to disassociate in order to not lose control. I have severe depression, and I don't know how I function and survive, to be perfectly honest. I've run the gamut of emotions over this incident. I have lost friends, relationships, and isolated from my family. Why? I don't feel I deserve what was taken away from others. I'm slowly killing myself daily over it because I can't find any meaning in it. That's because there is no meaning. It was an accident and I don't know how to accept it and move on. I've done different types of therapy. I've taken medication. I've talked to many people about it and nothing has changed. The reason I write all of this is to please implore all of you to be safe when you are behind the wheel of any motor vehicle. I did everything I could to be careful and something horrible still happened. I can't even imagine being the same level of reckless I have seen other drivers who end up getting away with it with absolutely no consequences. I hope with every ounce of my being that no one ever experiences the type of pain and suffering that has become my everyday life and reality. I wouldn't wish this pain, guilt, or suffering upon my worst enemy. I used to work a strange overnight schedule, 10-hour shifts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I try and keep awake the same hours on my days off, especially on Thursdays. This was a pretty rural area, so there wasn't much open at those hours except a gas station that had a tiny cafe area. I didn't want to keep people in the house awake, so I spent a lot of time at the gas station. I'd usually read or talk with the cashier on duty. I think she felt a little safer having someone else there too. One night, a man comes in with a little boy and asks if they can use the bathroom. It's something like 3 a.m. The kid looks sick or uncomfortable. To me, it looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. After they're in the bathroom, the cashier and I look at each other. She thinks there's something off about this too. I went outside to get a description of the vehicle. After they leave, we call the police. The local police passed it along to the county sheriff's department and a local officer came to the gas station. He asked us a couple more questions and we listened to his radio to hear what was happening. A county officer spots the truck and pulls it over. After the officer gets out of the car, the truck backs into it and takes off. The police pursue him. We didn't get a lot of details after that. He crashed or abandoned the truck. The truck was on fire and loose rounds of ammunition were going off in the truck. I believe the boy was somewhere safe because I didn't hear any more about him. The guy tried to swim across a small but deceptively treacherous river and he drowned. That was close to 20 years ago. If I remember correctly, he was the boy's dad but did not have custody. He was recently released from prison and the truck was stolen. At the time of the story, the man had been recently released from prison prior to stealing the truck and drowning. My wife and I were both very sick with the flu. My father watched our 2 small children and even came to sit with me in the hospital. The day after I got out of the hospital, he got the flu and died a couple days later. I still feel guilty knowing that he didn't have to sit with my children or that he didn't have to sit by my bedside, but he did. It helps knowing that he loved me so much that he was willing to put his life at risk to be with me. I just never imagined that the flu could have been so serious to be hospitalized, much less kill someone. I hold myself responsible and I feel guilty for getting him sick. When I was 18, I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's disease, and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit, and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this, we could no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. I haven't told many of my friends this story, but sharing it has helped wrap my head around what happened. It was about 3 a.m. on a Thursday last December. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. I was heading back from a party at my friend's house, pretty bleary-eyed. I had slept for a few hours and then got in my car. I was running out of gas, so I stopped at a gas station right off of I-95 before heading north to home. A guy walks up to me while I'm pumping gas and he asks for directions. He was older and a bit drunk. He came off as a yachty, and yachties aren't really common in that part of town. I had a bunch of yachty friends, so he didn't sketch me out, but I immediately kind of wrote him off. I told him to take I-95 north. He stumbles off and gets on his Vespa. Scooters are super common in South Florida, and then drives away. I go inside, get a drink, and then sit in my car for a few minutes, waking up before going. I hit the highway and I'm cruising north when I see a ton of emergency lights coming down the southbound side. I remember thinking, oh no, something's going down. I started paying closer attention to the road in front of me, and there were lights in my rear view too, coming up really freaking gassed. What happened next was kind of a blur and is not work safe. There were recognizable body parts in the road. Part of an arm, an upper torso with the head attached, blood everywhere, bits and pieces of plastic and metal in the road, and lumps of flesh or organ or something. I didn't see any of it until I was extremely close, but the image is something that has really messed me up. I called my mom. She said I was incoherent and screaming about blood. Florida Highway Patrol checked my car, which had blood on it but no damage, the next day, and the officer explained to me an older white male on a scooter had gotten on I-95 north. He merged inappropriately and was hit by a dump truck, and his corpse was hit by several other vehicles, including mine. They closed I-95 for the entire morning, well past rush hour. The news article said that remains and debris were strewn across an area the size of a football field. I sold my car and moved. The first 2 months were very rough, but I'm feeling better now, despite shaking at the moment. TLDR, I told a stranger to take the highway. He did so on a scooter. I drove through the aftermath of my advice. 7-ish a.m. on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver's side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. My mom is Thai and my dad is American, so I spend most of the year in the US and summers in Thailand. When I was 8, my family and my cousin's family were at the beach in Cha-am. My cousin's son, James, and I had been playing in the ocean for hours by this time, and we were both exhausted. Since we began playing, the water got much more violent with large waves as a thunderstorm was starting. As soon as my parents heard lightning, they yelled for us to come back to the shore, and I just started swimming back without checking to see if James was following. When I walked up onto the sand, I looked back and I couldn't see him. We were much farther out than 2 8-year-olds should have been, and James was too tired to keep himself above the water. I'm not sure what I could have done once I realized I couldn't find him, but I can't stop thinking about it. And when I go back to the condo there, I can't bring myself to get back into the ocean. Everyone responding has been incredibly supportive, and it means the world. I know realistically I couldn't change what happened, but that can't stop me from wishing I could. Thank you again to everyone for the kind words. 2 years ago, my sister was working at a dealership. Her husband and I were spending the day together until it was time to pick up sis from work. So when it came time to get his gal, I took the keys and said I'm driving. He was mad enough that he refused to go with me. When I came back with my sister, he was nowhere to be found, but it was common for him to go on walks to calm himself down, so we didn't think much of it. 8 a.m. the next morning, state police were banging on the door. They told us he was struck and killed by a train while he was sleeping on the tracks. That's not your fault. You didn't let somebody too drunk drive. That's what you're supposed to do. Was skiing with a friend when I was still living in Colorado. We were going a good speed and enjoying the mountain. When we came back onto the main trail, he was still going really fast. I yelled at him to slow down, and an elderly lady ended up merging at the same time as he looked back at me. My buddy is a good-sized guy and ended up colliding with this old woman. The ski patrol ended up grabbing her from the mountain, and she was clearly in a lot of pain. She ended up dying from her injuries a few days later. After her investigation, my buddy and the woman were both in the wrong. He had to pay some fines, but never got any sort of lawsuit. Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit. What are your experiences, funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia, not safe for work? A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it, and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" And I told him, "Yep, both of them." And he said, "Both? Aw, you guys are great." Not hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a German POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his headator to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. Nurse here, this really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. He wanted to kiss you. I hate this comment. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the entire restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Not the doctor or the nurse, but I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. "Why are the Rugrats on?" "You woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry. Why did I want to be angry? You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in the bed of the hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, so they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying, "You're snoring, roll over," and I rolled right onto the gurney. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been in a ward, etc. prior to the operation. Hold up, I'm talking about this. I am ranting about this right now. Why do people feel the need to put etc. in places that it doesn't belong? It's one item and it's not even part of a list. If you have more than 3 things to say, you can put etc. at the end of it and have it make sense. But if you say, "I was in a place, etc., that's only one place. Etc. means and so on and so forth and the rest, etc. Redditors, learn to English. Now we can move on. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit and lay down, and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right here," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mom was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my sack is itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my sack. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down in excess of smooth skin, then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours, and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh, Mum, they shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified, and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time, it was a serious issue. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with the EMT standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and I'm forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old, 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued, my wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a freaking sloth in here. How do we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep and I yelled, "Whoa there, Missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred, "My name is Worcestershire sauce." No, wait, that's not a cool name. "My name is Shark." Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his woohoo in my mouth." It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth chief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming, "My balls hurt!" The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said, "My balls hurt!" He replied, "Dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." 2 stories. 1, I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day. So she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now." And she mouthed, "Okay," and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2, I was in helping with the heart procedure and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the chest compressions and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press, sorry, press, sorry, for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1, going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no, and I passed out halfway through my response of, "Aww." 2, still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I look down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." But back in the bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair amount of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks, says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I mean, he's not wrong. Kind of a W. I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth taken out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. When I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, the nurse tried to put me in a wheelchair. Cue dialogue. "Let's get you in a wheelchair. I got it, baby." Think Fetty Wap type accent. I'm very white. "Oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea." Tries to stand, but slams into wall and slides down face first. "Oh no!" She put me in the wheelchair and rolled me to the car. I giggled the whole way there while leaning my head on her hand and looking up at her face. Side note, hands down the best 2 weeks of summer I've ever had. KFC potatoes and ice cream all day while in a drug stupor? Heck yes. I hear I just played Minecraft with my little brother and dug enormous holes the entire time. Came out of anesthetic, and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the butt," and I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure." It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse, not so amused. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to sleep." Not a doctor. A friend was in a car crash pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months and he had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on him, he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about it, he didn't believe us, so we asked her and she confirmed it. She said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse, ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground, she nods, and I go back to sleep. I was working in the pediatric ER and sedating a skater kid, 14 or 15. We're talking more a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk. Kind of kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set and in the cast. His mom is typical well-to-do suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, i.e. not trashy at all, and family was likely from a well-to-do part of town. My buddy, who is fairly hairy on his arms, etc., we don't need to have this discussion again, reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. Kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed, and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow and his mom just looks mortified in the 2 to 3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, "Man, I sure do love to lick some." His mom immediately turned bright red and walked out of the room and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The ER doc was this young petite girl and she said she peed herself a little, she was laughing so hard. For months we would give that guy lick emotions in the air when we passed him in the hall and putting Rolling Stone stickers in his locker, etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something, standing at the desk, and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he's been fishing. Not a nurse, but I have a good one. It's been 15 years and I'm still horrified when I think about it. I have to preface the story by saying that I have a super conservative, girl next door type of personality. I am shy, somewhat of an introvert, and most definitely never want to be the center of attention on purpose. I went in for a colonoscopy with the yum-yum juice that made me forget everything that happened, although I vaguely remember talking and hearing laughter. When I woke up, people were smirking and glancing at each other, trying to suppress their laughter. I asked if something happened and the staff reassured me that everything was good. So when the doctor came in to talk to me before I was released, I asked him if something funny had happened. He reassured me that I had a very normal procedure and then told me that sometimes the medication caused people to lower their inhibitions, but that the effect wore off very quickly, as does the medication. I asked him what he meant by lowering their inhibitions, and he paused again and reassured me that it happens to a lot of people. So yeah, I spent my entire colonoscopy talking dirty to my doctor and his tools. I never went back to that doctor again. TLDR, Yum Yum Juice made me say dirty things to the doctor, change doctors, and consider moving out of state due to my humiliation. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us, and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, "This is the guy!" Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a chorsman's butt and hung on for dear life, who was the woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. TLDR, grabbed a girl's butt in the OR, got nicknamed by the staff, and became the talk of the hospital for a while. Edit. My top comment is how I perved on some poor woman when I was out of my gourd on drugs. Wonderful. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big woohoo." I've had a vasectomy, so this one is especially funny to me since they usually only use localized numbing agents. Unless he got a special doctor, that comment was 100% him. I woke up in a recovery room after having my wisdom teeth out, and no one was in there with me, so I thought it'd be a good idea to get up and have a look around. Apparently, I had been awake a minute before and asked the doctor for some water, but when she left to get it, I went in and out of consciousness and forgot all about it. They were pretty terrified when I just up and vanished. A few months later, my brother had his wisdom teeth out. We left the surgeons with no issue, but on the drive home, my brother lost his mind. I had to take a circuitous route home because my brother wanted to see the circus. Every house we drove past, he was pointing out imaginary animals and giggling hysterically. He was 17 at the time. Anesthesia apparently does weird stuff to us. While not medical, I was a prison officer doing an escort for and handcuffed to a prisoner having a minor procedure done under general anesthetic. After the procedure, he starts waking up and chatting about stuff. Then he starts telling me about his mobile phone he had smuggled in, the make and model, and how he keeps it plugged in his butt. Edit for those asking, I completed a security report and submitted it to the prison police department, I forget the names, and, as with the prisoner I saw swallowing drugs smuggled in, nothing happened. It was a small think phone. I think it was the Samsung Juke around 10 years ago, a finger from a latex glove to wrap it. I've been under anesthesia several times over the last 3 years, and no, I'm not a doctor or nurse either. The most recent time, however, I went in for an outpatient procedure where a stent was placed into a ureter, tube that leads to kidney. They go through your urethra to put it in, hence the anesthesia. Anyhow, it took more than the normal dose to put me under, and my wife later told me that when I came to, I was playing with myself and asking her if she wanted to take a ride to make sure this thing still works before we get out of here. The nurse was there at the time also. My wife told me she attempted to keep me covered for the nurse's sake, but I wasn't having it. I have no recollection of those events. Not a professional, medical or otherwise, but on the way home from the dentist, I was gone, and something in my mind remembered Metal Gear Solid, and I started yelling, "Liquid!" a la Snake. Apparently, I almost caused my mom to crash the car, and it quickly became annoying very fast, as one can imagine. Just coming out of surgery, and the nurse says, "I'm going to take your temperature now," to which I respond, "Will you give it back?" I'm not the medical professional in this story. My husband had emergency surgery a few years ago, and when he woke up, he was just different. I can't explain it. He recognized who I was, but his personality was completely different, and the way he spoke to me was completely different. It's sort of like in movies where people wake up in someone else's body. It freaked me the heck out. 36 hours later, it was like he just woke up and was himself again. The weird part is, he had no memory of the past 36 hours. He remembers being sick and he remembers the emergency room, but after that, nothing. A lot of people came to visit him in that time period too, a bunch of family and everyone from the office, and he has no memory of any of them. The only thing that I can think of is that whatever medication that was used in the anesthesia that gorked him finally worked its way out of his system. Thank you for the new verb, to gork. While on fentanyl for gallstones in the ER, I asked the ultrasound tech if she wanted to take a selfie with me. She declined and I got butthurt about it. Apparently, I also told my sweet grandmother, when asked if I was okay, that I was, "Fine, Gran, I'm high as giraffe balls." Redditors who have walked in on their significant other cheating, what were the next 30 minutes like? I walked in and she was acting very nervous. She also wouldn't let me walk to the room. It clicked and I got literal tunnel vision. Such a strange sensation. I don't remember too much, but the outer edges of my vision were black and I can only hear my own breathing. I guess I pushed her aside like she was a broom. Thankfully didn't hurt her. Then I went into the room and realized he was in the bathroom. What I remember is that I opened the door like a regular person. The broken door and her account say that I Hulk smashed the door open with my fist. I grabbed him and calmly escorted him out of the house without saying a word. He was bawling like a 12-year-old girl. I closed the front door, turned around, and told her she had an hour to get all of her stuff and leave. I watched SportsCenter until she was gone. I didn't walk in, but I was helping her study and grabbed her phone from between us to Google something. I was immediately greeted with a long string of explicit text with her just friend. I set her phone down and left without a word. I sat in the fetal position beside my car in the parking deck for a good hour before I could even process it. We broke up later that day. She married him less than a year later, and they're divorced now. No happy endings for anyone in that story. I was pretty much trembling and wasn't capable of talking, just holding my tears. My hands were a bit shaky too. I wanted nothing but silence. One of the worst feelings ever. Didn't walk in. Caught him leaving as I went over the next morning to drop something off. She was in her skimpy nightwear kissing him goodbye. First thing that actually flashed across my mind was, I gotta get out of here or things are gonna go down. I was suddenly aware how I have anger issues, and that got a concealed carry license, and that I was carrying a loaded gun at that very moment. Looked at his smug face, looked at her panicked face, looked at his smug face again, turned and left, climbed on my bike and sped off. I never rode as fast, as recklessly, or as furiously as that time. I actually think I was trying to off myself. I did crash the bike. I was in such a murderous rage that I kept thinking faster for some reason. I entered a curve way too fast and slipped while leaning trying to make it. I got up, realized I was messed up, then kept walking into the middle of nowhere. I sat in a clearing and remained there until a policeman found me. I told him what had happened and handed him my gun, telling it was best he had used it because I felt the thing was demanding to be used. It was just my anger at the time. Police officer was sympathetic, drove me to the hospital and called a tow for the bike. The ride to the ER, I got to chatting with he and his partner. 10 minutes go by and we're all laughing our butts off lost in random conversation. Me and those guys are good friends to this day, and in many shenanigans we have been involved since. Regarding her, I never bothered to check. TLDR, got cheated on, gained best friends after trying to endanger self. I'm glad this one at least had a happy ending. Calmly went to the hardware store and bought all new locks for the doors. When I got home, she was already there. Kicked her out, changed locks. This is the manliest response I've ever heard. I was pretty much just shaking and stunned, so I walked my bike home and just went, huh, well that sucks. She kept trying to call the house phone, but I wasn't answering. It was surreal. I reacted like, okay, I'll wait in the living room while you finish. 3 days later, I utterly lost my crap. Still haven't found it. I didn't walk in on it happening, but I saw it coming and did everything I could to stop it, including telling my girlfriend that if the woman I suspected her having a thing with came to my apartment when I wasn't there, it was over between us. She constantly told me nothing was happening between them, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. When I was out of state for a funeral a week later, I went through the Google Home app and noticed recordings of the Google Home speaker being used after midnight. I listened to them and heard the recordings of my now ex-girlfriend and the other woman using my Google Home. I came back 4 days later, had this on my chest for 4 days, and asked my girlfriend as we laid in bed next to each other if anyone came to the apartment while I was gone. She looked me in the eyes and said no. I said, again, was girl's name in my apartment while I was home for a funeral. She continued looking me in the eyes, laying inches away from me, and said no. I picked up my phone and played the Google Home recording and asked her, then who the heck is this? She was a deer in the headlights. She couldn't speak for 5 minutes. I told her she was a liar, a manipulator, and a freaking coward, and told her to get the heck out. She left her Facebook open on my laptop I let her use for school. 4 years and an engagement. During the affair, I paid her taxes and paid to remove her wisdom teeth, all while she screwed the guy I didn't need to worry about in our bed. In our room I paid rent for. It really felt like getting hit by a bus. I couldn't breathe, threw up multiple times, and finally slept when I passed out drunk. Found out he was cheating on me for 4 months while he was miles away. I was just angry as heck and punched a wall in my house. The morning after I found out, I went to work and I asked my boss to transfer me to another state. A few weeks after going to another state, I met the love of my life, and we now have a puppy and are getting a house together. Wife of 6 years got a new job in medical device sales and was out of town for 3 weeks straight for training. The first 2 weeks went okay, but she had never traveled before, so it was difficult on both of us. I have several friends who work in the industry, and they all pretty much paint the same picture. Lots of alcohol, lots of hooking up. It's okay, not my wife. She would never. But the next time we spoke, she could tell something was wrong. She had been talking about this guy quite a bit in our conversations, so I asked about him. Oh, he's nobody. Just another rep from another state in training with her. Regardless, that afternoon, I got a text from him, explaining that my wife had told him that I was asking about him, and he decided to text me to reassure me that he was married, had 3 kids, nothing was going on. I bought it. And then, the night before she comes home, it happens. 4 a.m., I get a phone call from her, but in my slumber, I sent it to voicemail. She was absolutely wasted and had drunkenly dialed my phone instead of his and left a voicemail. The voicemail consisted of explicit details of their intimate encounters that week, and since they will be traveling together in the future, the continuation of more intimate encounters were promised, including details on how she loved it when he did X to her Y and Z. I got out of bed, walked down the hallway to our daughter's rooms, 2 and 4 at the time, grabbed both of them, and brought them to bed with me. I held them tight while they slept on each side of me, while I cried the remainder of the night. Not for me, but for them, because their world was going to get turned upside down in less than 12 hours from now. I then got out of bed, logged onto her computer, and, after a little investigative sleuthing, I forwarded every iMessage, every picture as well as the voicemail she drunkenly sent me to his wife. So to clarify a few things, this is a throwaway account, so any questions regarding 5-day-old account, etc. are because of that. First of all, thank you for the support, fellow Redditors. This happened a while ago and I moved on. It still hurts. I still haven't come to trust anyone fully yet, but really, I have no interest. I'm only 36, so I'm just having fun working on being a better me. Regarding paying support, even though she makes twice I do, I pay support because it's my duty to my kids, regardless of what she makes. I'm not hurting for cash, not by any means, and neither is she. And yes, the court system is heavily flawed and biased towards mothers. In cases like this, the girls should be living with me. But again, thank you for being awesome, Reddit. Fun story. I'm a bit late to the party, but I'll share anyway. Had a buddy that I had not seen for a while come to town. We were going to meet up and go drinking, but I ended up having to close because someone called in sick. Buddy goes out and parties all night. I tell him to call if he needs a ride. Get the call at about 3 a.m. to come get him at some chick's house. He gives me the address and it's my girlfriend's address. She lives with her sister, so I thought he went home with the sis. I walk in the house and head to my significant other's bedroom, and guess who's there? My buddy. Should have seen the look on her face, and it was priceless. Buddy asks what's going on. I tell him, let's go, and tell her to kindly screw off. She's crying, and Buddy is starting to get the picture. Tell him she was my friend of about 5 months. He feels terrible and is apologizing profusely. I tell Home we're even if he buys me breakfast. So we go get breakfast. I look at it as he did me a favor, nothing to feel bad about. TLDR, caught my buddy diddling my girlfriend, made him buy me breakfast. I can't help but laugh at this one because there are a lot of factors that I don't really know about, but it makes so much sense to have this kind of attitude after finding out about this. If she had did this to you, screw her. No reason to keep her around. She was doing him a favor. She was telling him straight up that she didn't think he was worth it. And honestly, she isn't worth it. Massive W to this man. Went on a brunch date after staying the night at her place. Some Irish dude was flirting with her while we ate and drank. I got up to take a dump and smoke a cig. I'm halfway through my smoke when she walked out the door holding hands with the dude from the bar. I wasn't even mad. Even waved as she left. I calmly sent a text saying we were done, which she didn't respond to until the next day. Apparently, I was overreacting, according to her. I laughed, hung up on her, then left to join my friends on the week-long camping trip we had planned. Again, more responses from the dudes that are nothing short of based. I love this. Kinda late to the party, but here's my story. Was with my girlfriend for 3.5 years. She spent a weekend with her friend. I trusted her because at the time it was my longest relationship and I didn't have a reason not to trust her. I didn't walk in on her, but one day she mentioned how she wanted to go see him again. The next morning I said, "Hey, can I use your phone to call my dad? Mine is messing up." I went through her messages and he said, "I loved the way you blew me," along with a bunch of other stuff. I walked back in the room, woke her up and said, "We're done." I felt crappy at first for going through her phone because it was wrong, then went to my best friend's house and got drunk and played video games. It was actually a pretty fun day after that. My ex before that cheated on me with the roommate we had move in with us. I was downstairs watching TV and heard them in the bedroom. I knocked on the door and she pretty much told me to screw off. I moved out the same day into my friend's place. Got drunk and played video games. Every girlfriend I've ever had has cheated on me. Video games haven't though. Not quite the ask, of course, but similar. My ex always stayed up way later than me because of his shift patterns, so I'd gone to bed around midnight and he was up watching TV. For whatever reason, I couldn't sleep well that night and was in and out for a couple of hours. About 2 a.m., I hear the bedroom door slowly open and I'm about to ask him if he's coming to bed when I realize he's just standing there in the doorway. I'm guessing he couldn't see that I was awake in the darkness. Then, he inches the door shut so it doesn't make a noise. I hear him put on his shoes and the front door slowly, carefully open and close. He came back around 4 a.m. to me sitting on the sofa and just about crapped his pants that I was awake. I just knew, and his reaction confirmed it. We broke up that night, but he was never brave enough to admit to that occasion of cheating or the dozens more that came before it. That I had to find out from others. Then, because we just signed a tenancy agreement, I had to live with him for almost a full year. Best year ever. This was so long ago that it is almost funny to think about because it made me a better person. I truly believe that. In college, scumbag boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was in town and we were all at a party together. They were from the same hometown and had a lot of mutual friends. I got too drunk and left. He told me he was staying and would come over in an hour. I had a lot of friends there too who were keeping an eye out. I got home and immediately got a call from a friend that they snuck off together to his apartment. We lived in the same complex, so it was about a 4-minute walk away. I sprinted back to his place, my best friend sprinting after me, walked into his room to see them, best friend runs in and punches the girl in the face. All pretty much a blur after that. Some yelling, crying, punching a wall, then just went home and cried a bunch. About 10 years later, wouldn't trade it for anything. Sobering experience and made me stronger. Unfortunately, this user paints a less exciting picture. It was like time stopped, like in a Wes Anderson movie. Everything was slow motion. He was passed out naked in his bed with some chick who told me to close the door. His housemate was rambling something frantically in front of me, but I was not there. I remember getting into the car and driving to a park, sitting in the driver's seat until I burst into tears. It was incredibly disassociated. It broke my heart, but I wasn't conscious when it happened. I related to a deep cut. There's a few moments of nothing until the blood starts to pour out uncontrollably and the excruciating pain starts. Not the crazy story others have, but went to visit her on my lunch break while she was visiting her family. I was in high school at the time and we had been dating for almost a year, so it might inform the story later. Her mother informs me she's at a friend's house up the street, so I go and check. It's the guy I've suspected for a while, and I ask if she's there. She answers the door in a skimpy tank top and short shorts and immediately starts crying when she sees me. I walk away, not even being bothered to care at this point since it has been building for like 3 months. She follows, crying, telling me it isn't what it looks like, and at one point falls down onto the grass. I walk to my car and tell her she has 1 hour to drop off everything my family has let her use/given her before she will vacate her stuff from my house, and I drive home. She shows up, gives over everything including car keys, house key, and other items. I was basically supporting her, distancing herself from them. She leaves and I take the rest of the day off in a haze. That's about the end. I am kind of a distant person in general, so the emotional part wasn't the biggest issue until it hit later in the day. This is a little confusing due to how many people are involved. I'll try to make it easy. So I wasn't the one that walked in on them. It was the drummer of my band. He was living with the guy my girlfriend cheated on me with. He, drummer, called me and told me, then said, "I'm on my way to your apartment to pack up your stuff." I contacted my mom and told her I need to move back home for a little bit. She was more than happy. She hated my girlfriend, so while my GF was still sleeping in bed with her screw buddy, I was home packing up everything. Best part was, she didn't have a job, so it was literally everything. I had it all moved out before she even got home. She had no idea why I moved, because, unknown to her and her screw buddy, my drummer was there the whole time. His car was at the shop, so someone else brought him home. They thought he was gone for the night. Long story short, she started dating an even different guy a few weeks later and called me drunk one night asking me to sleep with her. I didn't, but I made sure word got to her new boyfriend. Also, our favorite TV show together was Lie to Me, so I made sure that when I moved out, I hid all the DVDs of the show around the apartment for her to find. That alone made me feel a little better. Hope this wasn't too confusing. Dude, hiding the DVDs, that's a respectable kind of petty. Didn't walk in on, but my then boyfriend called and asked me to drop off his phone at his work. I go to retrieve the phone and it vibrated, so I looked to see who it was. Found all sorts of communication from a woman that is not safe for work. This was back in 2008 and my ex had a flip phone. I snapped it in half and threw it out. Wasn't a walk-in, but I still love telling this story because in hindsight, it's pretty freaking funny how horrendous this situation was. Was on and off with someone for years. She had commitment issues, to me at least. All of a sudden, we're talking more often for a few weeks. She seems more serious and wants to take a trip with me. We take a ferry ride out to this secluded island off the west coast of Florida to camp for a few days. Has a beach and bike trail. Second day we're there, I get a really long text from some random number, and it turns out she's been screwing her ex, guy she was dating in between our on and off, while talking to me. What's worse, she got him to watch her dog while her and I were on this trip. He was suspicious about how she had been acting, so we went through her texts on her MacBook and found out she was with me. Believe it or not, it gets even worse. The ferry that took us to this island wouldn't be back for another full 24 hours, so we had to stay another night there. I got bitten up by bugs that night, and then we awkwardly packed up all our crap the next afternoon and drove 2 hours back home together the next day, hardly speaking in that period. She dropped me off and drove to deal with her ex, and I never spoke to her again. Silver lining, I'm now happily married to the love of my life, and it's definitely not this woman. In my mid-20s, I was living with someone I'd been in love with for years. He said he loved me, but didn't want to commit and was interested in a polyamorous lifestyle. I did what I could to give him time to figure out what he wanted. We did everything together for 2 years. Traveled to Europe, went on vacations every couple months. We'd meet women online together and bring them home for crazy intimacy parties. My sex drive was off the charts back then, and I didn't really care if it was a guy or a girl helping get me off. We did a lot of crazy experimentation together. To this day, he knows more about me than any other person, and vice versa. Eventually, my self-esteem and sanity began to wear thin. Our relationship broke down. He'd begun to bring around one of our former playthings more and more. He'd always told me that I didn't need to worry about her because he wasn't really interested in her. It was just intimacy, and loved me most. Anyway, it came to the point where I needed to leave. I found an apartment with some friends, but wouldn't be able to move in for about 45 days. I told him I knew he was going to play with other girls, but begged him to not bring them home overnight until I could get out. It just hurt too much. One night I came home and heard giggling in his room. I was staying in a room next to his. I knew it was her. I texted him, asking why he couldn't just wait a little longer because he knew he was destroying me. He texted back, insisting that no one was there and I was crazy. Later, I heard moaning and gasping. Long story short, I saw her in the hallway the next morning. She smirked at me. I moved out 2 weeks early when my place opened up unexpectedly. He married the girl, but still toyed with my emotions up until the actual wedding. Whenever they had problems, he'd always come back, talking about second chances and how we were made for one another. I'm a happily married woman now, living in a wonderful city. I have a dog and nice apartment. I'm still not sure I'll ever recover from the rage and pain that man put me through. Just a quick PSA side rant here. Polyamorous relationships are definitely not for everyone. It involves a lot of communication between partners. For scumbags like this guy, it was an excuse to cheat. That's not how it goes for everyone. For people who are actually poly or part of a polycule, they're way happier with their partners because they're willing to have these conversations and not go behind each other's backs. It's all about setting and respecting boundaries. On my birthday, I got sick so I couldn't go out and celebrate, but my now ex-wife had arranged a big celebration with lots of friends, so of course she went out because it's crappy to cancel at the last minute on so many people. Anyway, I just went to bed and slept. 2 a.m. rolls around and she drunkenly climbs into bed, which wakes me up, but she didn't notice, and started texting and trying to take nude pictures, seriously, to guys. I saw because I was awake, took the phone from her, went through everything. She had multiple dating apps, was texting as many as 20 other guys and sending them naked pictures. All of them were taken while I was at home, either in another room or sleeping. The next 30 minutes were her sitting in silence and me packing my stuff to go to a hotel for the weekend. And then the following few weeks were spent with her telling me it was all my fault. We're not together anymore, clearly. I cracked the plaster on the wall with the back of my head. She said she was sorry, so sorry, that she didn't want it to end things between us. I told her to leave. She eventually did. That was the first time we broke up. Strangely, the others weren't as bad because I had already been through it. Still bad, but the final straw made it very easy to walk away. I worked for a few months, saved everything I could, then moved across the country. The last text I got from her was, "Where are you? We need to talk. I'm coming over. Everyone's telling me you moved, but I know they're lying. I never have snappy comebacks and I never get revenge. But tapping the word California into my cheapy Nokia and then sending it from the sunny streets of Venice to the icy winter frozen wasteland of Minnesota is one of the best feelings I've ever had after being hurt. It all started to get better from there. She married an idiot knuckle-dragging caveman misogynist. She saw me on a TV show once and sent me a picture of herself in an effort to smooth things over. Time had not been kind. When you're done, you can meet me at the park. I sat there with the six-pack waiting for him. Go on. I literally caught him with her on top in our bed. Anyways, so I waited as he showed up with already a few cold ones consumed. Discussed about how long it had been going on and that I was moving out, and he could keep the bed. He's actually one of my good friends still after 15 years. I just hate drama, so it's better to walk away. Sorry it's not a more exciting story. Doctors of Reddit, what was your dumbest r/I am very smart patient experience? RN here. I see some crazy stuff, but one thing that stands out was the time I was admitting a guy to the hospital. I can't really remember what for, but he was about 400 pounds, diabetic, heart disease, you name it. Anyhow, I'm at the computer going over some admission questions with him and his 10 family members who are crowded in the room with him. A few minutes in, he starts complaining that he's thirsty. He needs something to drink right now. So I get on my phone and call the nurse assistant and ask her to bring in some ice water. As soon as the words are out of my mouth, the whole family screams, "No! No water! He's allergic to water!" Well, this is going to be a problem. Turns out the guy had been drinking nothing but Sprite and sweet tea for years because of his water allergy. The next question the wife had was, where are we all supposed to sleep? The whole family, 10 people, were planning to stay at the hospital with him. You can't make this stuff up. Was working at a clinic. I was speaking with a non-controlled diabetic patient about her sugar intake, and she says she drinks a 32-ounce soda every day. I ask her if it's regular or diet, and she replies with, "It's half regular. I let the ice melt first so there isn't as much sugar in it." Sorry, but that isn't how it works. I had a patient who was a completely non-compliant diabetic, smoker, morbidly obese, who had his first heart attack at 45. His blood pressure was also super high. And instead of taking his antihypertensive medications, he went to the gym. In the gym, he would sit in the sauna for a very long time, and sweat a lot, and lower his blood pressure by becoming dehydrated. Amazing. I bet he wouldn't listen to a dang thing you said either, because it did technically lower his blood pressure. I have one. I got this from my friend, who is a doctor on the children's ward in a rural hospital. These parents bring in their child whose hair is infested with lice. The lice was visible to the naked eye and could be seen crawling on the child's clothing. While the medical staff examined the child in order to determine a course of action, they discovered the child was covered in a white powder and smelled heavily of chemicals. They asked the parents what were the substances and the smells emanating from the child. The parents said, quite matter of fact, it was 7 powder and the flea and tick spray they used on their dogs on the family's farm. Needless to say, social workers were notified about this case. 70-year-old female tripped and fell 2 days ago. She came in with hip pain, but reports after the fall her nose was bleeding. She had landed on her nose. About a year prior, her dentist had messed up an infraorbital nerve block and caused some swelling in that region, but that was all resolved. This old lady is now convinced her nosebleed after falling on her face is related to an infection from the dental issue a year ago. After multiple back and forth on the etiology of the nosebleed, she became the first patient I raised my voice and put down an authoritative, "No, you are wrong, just stop it." This has got to be the medical equivalent to, "The update you installed on the computer a year ago is making it run funny. Get over here and fix it." I work for an optometrist, and it was the month before school started, and a woman brought in her son to have his eyes checked for the first time. Seems like a reasonable thing for any parent, even he was a little older than usual for a first eye exam. Better late than never, I guess. The mom was well-spoken and appeared fairly intelligent. Everything went as normal, the doctor examined the boy, and ended up prescribing glasses. When the doctor was explaining to the mom that her son had to wear his glasses all the time since he's nearsighted and basically can't see clearly past 5 feet in front of him, and will definitely need glasses for school. For some reason, this caused a switch to flip in the mom, and she spazzed out on the doctor, saying that her son doesn't need glasses and that the doctor is only saying that he does because he wants to sell glasses. She says that she only brought her son in because there was some form for school that needed to be filled out and that doctors are all con artists trying to push unnecessary medications and interventions. The doctor tried to calm her down and explain that he's only trying to help them, but that she was free to get a second opinion and gave her a copy of the kid's prescription and sent them on their way. About 4 months later, the lady is back asking for another copy of her son's prescription. Apparently, the first semester midterm results were in, and her son failed them all because he couldn't see the board in his classes and needs glasses. Any variation of this, which I get all the freaking time. Me. So how are things going with your diabetes? I don't have diabetes. Then why are you taking metformin and Victoza and whatever? I used to have diabetes. Then replace diabetes with hypertension/antihypertensives, etc. Or when I ask them what medical diagnosis they have and they say none while taking a ton of meds. Or when they misname a funny part, prostrate, tendant, uterus, to name a few. Do you take any medications? No. Are you supposed to take any medications? Yes. What for, and do you know what they are? No. Do you think this chest pain could be because of the heart attack I had a few years ago? Well, gee, mister, it sure probably could be. Not a doctor, but I'm a nurse who worked in the OR at a trauma center. Was doing surgery on a 19-year-old who tested positive for meth and cocaine, who was grilling the anesthesiologist about every drug we were going to use in surgery because he didn't like putting chemicals in his body. Gotta stick with that organic, fair trade, non-GMO cocaine. Most of my own stories go along similar lines to patient has chest pain driving a coachload of school children, thinks it's indigestion, swigs bottle of Gaviscon, later diagnosed with a huge heart attack. My favorite ever story comes from a colleague. A patient comes into A&E with abdominal pain. As part of the workup, he gets an abdominal x-ray which shows the problem as clear as day. The colleague has then proceeded to remove, from the patient's rectum, an 8-inch replica of Nelson's Column, the statue in the center of Trafalgar Square, London. On showing it to the patient, the response was, "Oh, that's Nelson. He lives up there." He lives up there? You're just walking around with that in your butt 24/7? I've got two stories that stick out in my mind. The first is the mother of a toddler who came into emergency. The kid had cruddy green/bloody stuff coming out of his left nostril and a lot of redness and swelling of only the left side of his nose and the adjacent cheek. Mom was sure he caught a sinus infection and just wanted some antibiotics. Now, I know some kids like shoving whatever will fit into their body orifices, and that this was more than likely given the one-sided nature of his condition, but Mom was insistent that he never puts things in his nose. It took some convincing, but I finally got her to let me take a look. Gave a squirt of midazolam in the good nostril to settle him, then dug with some tweezers through the crud until I pulled out a big ol' button battery. It would have been burning his nose for a couple days. Hopefully he healed up well. Side note, if a kid swallows a button battery, it can do a similar thing to their esophagus. This is an emergency and needs to be dealt with ASAP. I actually sneezed after reading that. Patient had a hard time getting pregnant. Finally conceived but miscarried. Patient has a D&C so she can try again, this time with medical intervention. We monitor her blood to ensure the pregnancy hormone is gone before beginning treatment, but she keeps coming back with high levels of hormone. Docs are worried because she might have some retained placenta or pituitary disorder, and this could be super bad for future fertility. We call her in for a conversation about the hormone levels not going away. After talking together for what might be wrong, they are going to go home and think about further tests. She says, "I need to go. I have an appointment at the weight loss center for an HCG shot." Turns out that she is on the HCG diet. HCG is the pregnancy hormone, and this was after an hour of the doc saying, "We don't know why you have these constant high levels of HCG in your blood and we are worried." Patient inquiring about birth control was adamant she wanted an IED. Take cover! It's a boy! Had a young woman with recurring UTIs that began after a recent partner and with no STDs. Went through the standard questions trying to figure out what could be causing them and eventually found out she had been lubricating with jelly, not KY jelly. The mix-up had literally been a joke on House. It took me some effort to keep a straight face, but we eventually resolved the problem and she stopped getting UTIs. Oh, I have two good ones that come to mind. Clinical pharmacist here, by the way, with one story in the ER and one in the pharmacy. ER physician told me this one. 16-year-old boy presented to the ER with an extremely swollen, discolored woohoo. Apparently, he had been using his mom's insulin needles to draw blood out of his arm and inject it into his own woohoo. He thought that adding blood would help increase his size. His woohoo was terribly infected and he was hospitalized for a week or so. One day in the pharmacy, a girl comes to the counter requesting a refill for her birth control. We pulled up her profile and realized we couldn't refill it because she just got a 28-day fill less than 2 weeks ago. When we asked what happened to the other one, she said she was out. Apparently, both her and her boyfriend were each taking a pill each and was adamant that was how they needed to prevent pregnancy. I can't fault her for being proactive, but I will say that she's doing too much. I'm a chorusman, not a doctor, but I once had a patient tell me that there was no credible research that smoking was bad for one's health. Okay. Optician here. We had a patient who refused to let us use the tonometer, a machine for checking ocular internal pressure to diagnose glaucoma. He said that puff machine gives you glaucoma and we weren't going to pull that on him. He told us his father got an exam and had glaucoma after using that machine. His uncle and brother also had no signs of glaucoma, and after getting the puff test, both people had been diagnosed with a disease. Glaucoma doesn't have any outward symptoms before you start going blind. This idiot just told me he has a very strong familial disposition to glaucoma and refused to be tested for it. Also, puff isn't that bad, guys. Try contacts. Your eyes stop fighting back pretty quick. The puff is a lot better than the old machine. It just hit you on the eyeball with a little ball and a lever. I also have plenty of patients that don't understand family history. I interview patients directly, so we don't have any real paperwork, and too many people can't answer simple questions. Do you or any of your direct family members have diabetes? Yes. Yourself or your family? Alternatively, if yes to family members, they start listing their spouse's family or stepchildren, not how genetic disposition works. Or after getting no answers to diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma, thyroid problem, heart problems, etc., I ask if they take any medications. Yeah, atorvastatin, thyridazine, metformin, and low-dose aspirin. Oh, so you have everything I asked about. Check. Want some more? Way too many people don't understand presbyopia. As you age, your lens hardens and can't focus up close anymore. Of course, when this is explained, I get a lot of people who believe they're way too young for bifocals. No, 60 is not too young for bifocals. Why doesn't the doctor have to wear bifocals? He does. He's wearing progressives. You don't see the line. Or after trying to get used to multifocal lenses for a few days, giving up and demanding we remake them as single vision, and then getting mad at me again when they can't read with them. I never needed bifocals before. Why can't you just make me regular glasses? Regular glasses always work just fine. Yeah, you used to be 20. Also, you came to see us because you can't read with your regular glasses. In the same vein, these same people complaining about their own insurance to me because progressives are expensive. A line bifocal is covered entirely. Progressives cost a lot. I can't have lines in my glasses like an old person. Then you want progressives. This easily triples the bill. Why are you so expensive? I need to be able to see. Yeah, you need a bifocal. You don't need a progressive, you want a progressive. Insurance pays for what you need, not want. I actually had a guy make me talk to his insurance agent about him needing medically necessary progressives. A progressive lens is never medically necessary. Stop being cheap and listen to what I say. I am not a salesman, I'm a medical professional. Stop acting like you know better than me. 80-plus-year-old patient who was declining with multiple diagnoses and about 3 decubitus ulcers. Daughter was adamant that her father be kept on his strict paleo diet because that would supercharge his healing. She had a stack of diet books. He simply wasn't getting enough nutrition to heal the ulcers. He didn't like the diet at all, by the way. At some point, you kind of have to stop being polite and just tell patients and family members bluntly that you don't have time for this crap and what you recommend they can do and what they want, and just document everything. It happens a lot, but she sticks out. TLDR, gross eyeball stories from eye doctor. I recently had a 30-year-old insulin-dependent male argue he knows when to take his sugar medicine. He had bilateral retinopathy and a severe vitreous heme in one eye, legally blind. Driving a car last eye check 8 years ago, lost glasses 2 years ago. Will need 4 more surgeries, including an inevitable cataract. I had a patient tell me they clean their contact lens with milk because it gets the acid off them. I had a patient ask me if it was okay to look briefly at the sun for short periods of time to improve their eyes. I was amazed and kindly suggested they don't. Had a patient put eardrops in one eye, white part of eye, conjunctiva, scarred over entire cornea and was left with no light perception. Asked me if he should have come in sooner. It had been 4 months. He needs a cornea transplant, which suck and take over a year to recover from. Patient with a retinal detachment told me to put more medicine in their glasses to see better. Macula was off, so they could barely count fingers 4 feet in front of their face. Had a patient wear contacts designed for 2-week daily wear, left in for 8 months. They literally grew into and became a part of the eye. It was repulsive. Had a patient with a 6-year-old translating. Basically, no clue besides eye hurts. Her hand covering her eye. I asked to see the problem. Her eye looked like a shriveled up grape. The optic nerve was holding onto a shriveled up, decayed eye loosely hanging in the orbit. She wanted glasses. Had a lady put jock itch in her eye to cure her suspected fungus. I asked her why she thought it was a fungal infection, and she just had an inkling. They are rare. Cataracts on a 58-year-old male working rooftops for 30 years with no sunglasses. Best corrected vision was count fingers 6 feet one eye, barely seeing better in other. First eye exam. Mad when told he needs surgery and should not drive a car. Had a patient tell me the benefits of using alcohol wipes to clean her privates. Out of the blue. I'm an eye doctor. Had a guy clean his contacts and shower with shampoo because he was convinced it was better. Raging red eye 2 weeks later. Homemade contact solutions are always fun to hear. Vinegar? Salt water? Spit is not cleaner than fresh solution, but please tell me more. Had a guy recently come in because wife made me. Tried with tweezers to remove metal from cornea. Didn't look pretty. I removed the remaining metal rust with a needle and spinning burr tip brush. Antibiotics Q2 hours. Told him to not do that again. Had a patient crush a pill up and put in eyes. It was an eye vitamin but taken by mouth. Her eyes were angry. I had a patient walk in one day with no glasses or contacts. Had full penetrating cornea transplant in both eyes 17 years ago. Last eye exam was 12 years ago. Swore he could see fine. Clearly a transplant graft rejection, one eye with no functional vision, and other was a gnarly looking good eye. I barely got him seeing with glasses on the one eye and can't drive. Uncontrolled diabetes too. Messy. have had more than one patient argue with me about not seeing right. They either had 2 or more contacts in the eyes or none at all. When they try to remove a contact that is not there, it causes a painful abrasion. Multiple women using non-approved glues to glue on fake eyelashes, leaks and burns in eyes. Just why? Using fake contacts from the nail salon. Then it never ceases to amaze me when I hear, I just use the same solution until it turns brown or black. Every day. Had a patient using a homeopathic drop to cure itchy eyes. She had pubic lice living on her lashes and they lay eggs and bite. Repulsive. But still convinced the drops cause the lice? Here's a link to a Wikipedia article about crab louse. You pluck the offending lashes out and use a cream to kill the crap you can't see. Thank God that was only once. I have to convince a lot of people to not use hand sanitizer in their eyes. Way too many, actually. I had a patient not taking her herpetic eye drops just because she wanted to pray instead. Yes, herpes on eye. Luckily, I convinced her to do both medicine and pray. I could go on and on. I'm a dental student. One patient in particular is a pathological liar. During one visit, they claimed to have gone to medical school. Next visit was that they did dental army. Last visit was that they had a PhD. The patient will say things like, "Hey doc, do you need me to move my head mesial or distal?" "No, I need you to move your head right." "Hey doc, are these cavities being caused by the anaerobic pathology microbes?" "No, they're caused by you eating snacks all day and not brushing." I'm an OR nurse, and I had an oral surgery patient who had a self-reported history of 250 plus various surgical procedures, a list of 20-some allergies, tons of reported health issues, plus her preteen son supposedly had dozens of health issues as well. She refused to remove her glasses during induction, started screaming and crying about claustrophobia when we put the mask on her face. She also insisted on taking a stuffed animal to the OR. Anyway, getting to the point. She was having oral surgery because she told us, insisted, that the last time she went to the dentist, they told her not to brush her teeth for at least a year. So she hadn't brushed her teeth in like a year and a half. That one was for the books. Pediatric dental is a minefield for I am very smart material. But why does my child have 17 cavities? We don't drink soda or eat processed sugars. All we drink is organic juice and eat those real fruit gummies. Well, fruit has a lot of sugar in it, but the bottle says no sugar added. Right, there's no additional sugar added, but there's already a lot in there naturally. Oh, and we're an all-natural household, so we don't use fluoride toothpaste. And we don't floss because the material the floss is made out of is toxic. Oh, and a lot of times we don't brush their teeth before bed because we're too tired. My favorite excuse for not flossing their child's teeth is, "Do you know how hard it is to floss a kid's teeth?" I mean, I'm a pediatric dental hygienist, so yeah. Where to start? Picture a middle-aged man. His index finger is 5 times the size of the rest of his fingers. It smells, it's leaking pus, there's necrotic tissue, basically one huge infected cancerous finger. He was a firm believer in not taking any sort of medication, including antibiotics or chemo. Died a few weeks later, but he did manage to tell us we were all idiots before he passed away. Patient was a young child who came in with an extremely high blood glucose level. Once she was stable, we did some teaching, and I kept her for a few days for observation. For some reason, every time I checked her, her levels would be extremely high although we were appropriately treating her. Turns out her family would bring her fast food for every meal and hide it in the side table. More teaching and resources were put into place. Had a mom in hysterics because she was convinced that her neighbors, friends, stepson's, teacher's dog has MRSA, so her baby was going to die. It took everything within me to not tell her that most of the hospital staff have MRSA. Just had some amazing people inform me with several scholarly documents that MRSA isn't as prevalent as once thought. It's only about 5% of hospital staff. Thank you, wonderful people. But it took 3 hours for me to calm her down after I called infectious control, her pediatrician, gynecologist, and family doctor. Yes, I had to call all these people. Yes, they laughed at me. Yes, she was beside me the whole time, questioning their judgment. I love my job, but at times it makes me crazy. I'm gonna leave you all with this wild ride of a story. ERRN here. Not a physician, but you may find this interesting. Young adult male presents with multiple abscesses on various parts of his body. States he injected his boyfriend's semen into himself trying to get pregnant. He tells one of the APCs he should have gone with his original plan and tried on his dog first. Psych clears him. He's admitted to the floor and gets IV antibiotics. What? I've heard of not sticking your woohoo in crazy, but that dude's boyfriend was sticking a lot more than woohoo in crazy. Wow, that's phenomenal. As a psych doctor, we allow for stupidity, but man, that sounds extra special. So, if psych cleared him, that means they determined he wasn't delusional, which means They somehow figured out with a degree of certainty that he was just that stupid. As someone who has done ER mental health assessment in the past, I would love to have been there to hear the series of questions that led them to, yep, he's actually that stupid. What is the quickest way you've seen someone mess their life up? Just a fair warning, there's going to be a lot of drug use and sadness in this one. So, not so much bad as it was sad. This happened around 2006 to 2008. Can't remember exactly when because I was about 11 at the time. I had a friend in elementary school and middle school that lived within 2 miles from me and a CVS between our houses. Her, 12 years old, her little brother, 9 years old, and her mother, about 40-ish, were at CVS picking up a few things and were walking to their car in the parking lot. Apparently, as they were walking, the mother pushed both my friend and her brother away from her. My friend hit her head on the sidewalk and woke up to her brother screaming and crying. What happened was that as they were walking, the mother noticed a car that was slamming on the gas while trying to back out of a parking spot. The car was heading straight towards them and the mother pushed the kids out of the way. Car pinned the mother to the wall of the CVS and she died within minutes. The little brother saw the whole thing happen and has since been struggling with depression and traumatic PTSD since. And my friend got a concussion from the incident, lost her mother, and has never been the same. Sad thing is that the driver wasn't drunk or high or anything. It was a tiny little 80-year-old lady that wasn't used to driving the car and pressed too hard on the gas pedal. Don't exactly know what happened when the police got involved, but my friend has been messed up ever since. This forum has had a lot of comments about terrible people that have done terrible things. Not all bad things happen because of bad people. Sometimes they just happen. I had the pleasure of meeting the kindest person I've ever met. He came from a really snobby and popular family, but he was friends with literally everyone. He would hang out with the outcasts. He would actually come over if you posted online about how you were lonely. He didn't care at all about high school politics. I met him once and he made a significant impact on my life. He was just genuine about being fair and nice to everyone he met. He had every chance to be a jerk given that he was smart, good-looking, came from a wealthy family, but nope. He gave off this huge sense of peace when you were around him. If I had to describe the second coming of Jesus, it was him. A year after meeting him, he ends up missing for 3 days. Eventually, the story unfolds that he was at a party the night he went missing, but he was the designated driver for everyone, so it was odd that he just suddenly left before anyone else did. 3 days later, my brother finds him on an old logging road in his pickup, head blasted off with a shotgun. He had apparently taken shrooms and wanted to meet God. His family found his Bible, and it was filled with highlighted passages about heaven and the soul finding peace with Jesus. I'm guessing that the church he went to had a lot to do with it. It was the kind where everyone affluent and popular goes to, but given that they were disgusting people, they didn't seem to practice what they preached. The evil go to hell, but not us because we are here on Sunday. At his funeral, the pastor had the gall to say he went to hell because he committed a sin by killing himself. That kind of church. I really miss you, Stevie. Thank you for showing me the single bit of kindness I ever found in that town. Not me, but a friend was in AP Chem and they were working with some sodium something and his classmates snorted it as a cocaine joke. He was rushed to the ER and now his risk for nasal and lung cancer is through the roof. His predicted lifespan is like mid-30s, maybe early 40s now, and it was all for a crappy drug reference. A fourth-year neurology resident got fired for attacking an Uber driver. She went through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and was about to finish her fourth and last year of residency, acquired hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt along the way, and blew it all after she physically assaulted somebody. My college roommate hit a patch of wet leaves on his motorcycle and hit the curb. The bike flipped and hit him in the chest. When the cops arrived, he was disoriented and bruised, but otherwise okay. The cops thought he was drunk and took him in. In the drunk tank, he complained that he couldn't breathe. The nurse looked him over and said he was fine. Later, he collapsed in his cell. The cops woke him up, handcuffed him, and drove him to the hospital. When they got there, he was dead. Punctured lung. Suffocated. He was 23 and a senior at a very good college. He worked full-time and paid his own way. He was funny and kind and empathetic. He was supposed to be someone important. You'd think over time I would miss him less, but as I get older, I just think of who he would be as an older person. As a parent, I think of the wonderful kids denied a chance to exist because of the stupidity of multiple officers, and it surprises me the visceral, primal sadness I still feel about his loss. This happened in a 2-week period. A friend of mine lost his kitchen job due to layoffs. Looked in the paper for a job he could get quick so he could make his bills, rent, etc. Finds a listing for a company looking for a driver/delivery person ASAP. He has a car, so he figures it would be a good quick fix. Calls and gets the job over the phone and is told he starts the next evening. Gets a quote-unquote company cell phone and does his first pickup. Turns out it's an escort agency and he's picking up and dropping off the talent. Does this for a few nights and starts getting to know the girls. Turns out they're all addicted to crack. Big surprise. They get the idea in his head that he's doing all the groundwork, so he might as well post the ads himself and get his own phone, and they'll work for him. So we're about a week into this adventure, and he's gone from line cook to pimp. Fast forward a couple of days into pimping, and he comes to the conclusion that all these girls spend their money on is crack, so why not cut out the middleman and start paying them in what they want? He doesn't know where to get crack, but his kitchen buddies can hook him up with coke. Gets a bag of coke and Googles how to make crack. Yes, really. Whips up a batch of kitchen crack and then is concerned that maybe he didn't make it correctly. So logically, he should try it first before giving it to his ladies. 36-hour crack binge later, he's hooked and proceeds to sell off everything, including the car and phone, in the next few days. I dropped by his place to hang out around day 10. I had no idea any of this was going on. He meets me at the door, explains what he's been up to for the past few days, and says he doesn't want me there unless I'd like to pay and hook up with one of the crackheads in his living room. Strangely, I declined. Last time I saw him, he was cracked out, yelling at people for change on a downtown street. 14 days and his entire life turned to garbage. I was the catcher for a kid in my town who was a nasty pitcher from an early age. At 16 or 17, he could throw 90-mile-per-hour fastballs, breaking balls, whatever. It was a pain to catch, and I had to keep a wet sponge inside my mitt in case I caught one directly in the palm. He was drafted 12th overall by the Marlins and received a $1.8 million signing bonus that he got before he even went to spring training. Ended up blowing over $1.5 million on drugs and partying, developed a coke habit that turned into an oxy habit that turned into heroin. Lost his ability to play, lost his spot on the team and his shot at many millions of dollars. It wasn't exactly overnight, but the dude wasted $1.5 million plus everything he would have gotten had he continued his upward trajectory, and it all happened in about 8 months. My ex-wife had 4 beautiful kids, 2 girls, twin boys, decent job, and an MBA with way more earning potential than she was at. Had bariatric surgery, got obsessed with the attention she received from losing weight, Instagram, etc. Met some guy on this game she played, cheated, tried to make it work, my fault for not ending it, went on a trip for work, met some other guy, quote, fell in love, meth and heroin, landed a surprisingly great job, got fired 2 months later for not performing and being late/sick all the time, double deposited her paychecks at least twice. Now she's awaiting trial for 4 felonies, presumably still doing drugs, and she has no right to see the kids because I refuse to let them see her around that crap. She makes no effort to see them and blames everyone else for her problems. Don't do drugs, kids, or be a self-obsessed ever victim. This kid I know, his cousin gave him a gun over the holidays as a present. So this idiot ordered pizza with his friends, and instead of paying, they robbed the delivery guy. Again, this is after they gave the address and name for the order. So now, because he just turned 18, he's being tried as an adult and faces like 10 years or more for being stupid. We were about 17, and me and my friends went to a beach house for summer. Well, there was a cliff, not so big one, should be around 5 meters high, and one of my friends decided to run and jump without checking how deep the sea was. Long story short, I had a lot of rocks, and he broke his back. He didn't screw over his life, but he lost both of his legs. Justine Sacco, the lady that tweeted, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white, and then got on an airplane. This story is too long to fit in the video, so just Google Justine Sacco and you should get an article explaining what happened. When I was in college, I had a job at a local supermarket. One of my colleagues left at the beginning of summer as she was headed to uni in the autumn. Next thing I know, she's in the papers because she was driving a car while someone was car surfing on it and the guy died. Saw her in the shop a couple weeks after it happened and she looked a mess. I believe she went to prison, but not sure how long for. I used to work at a little diner in Constance Bay, Ontario. I imagine I could find an article about this. Didn't happen to me, but to a customer. I would estimate that it was about 10 years ago now. This post was made 6 years ago. The customer, female, and her boyfriend were out drinking at the local watering hole. There was that bar in the Legion in the little town. Anyway, her and her boyfriend had driven to the bar, and when they left, they did the smart thing and left their car at the bar and decided to walk home. Constance Bay is quite small. Basically, it's a main road that loops around the whole town and all side roads branch off of that. The main road has a really sharp turn at one spot. So, her and her boyfriend are walking on the side of the road. No sidewalk since it's a little town. Everyone literally knows everyone. As they're walking, a guy hits them. The driver was wasted drunk. He had been cut off at the Legion a while before the incident. Her and her boyfriend were hit so hard they were thrown into the ditch. Her boyfriend was killed instantly and she was severely hurt. She laid in the ditch for a few hours, unable to move until someone driving by noticed a hand sticking up. 911 was called. She had a couple surgeries after. If I recall, they had to put a metal rod in her leg. So, After drunk idiot hits them, he keeps driving and takes the sharp curve I mentioned too fast and ends up hitting the garage of a house on the corner. This wakes up the owners of the house, who didn't think too much of it, as apparently this was a common occurrence. Thing is, the owners of the house were the parents of the girl who had just gotten hit. I remember hearing how shook up and guilty they felt when they found out what happened. So, drunk guy was caught and charged, obviously. I guess he was known in the area. His stupid decision not only ruined his life, but the lives of the girl, her boyfriend, and their friends and family. It was pretty sad. She would come into the diner for breakfast, and I remember seeing the massive brace she had on her leg. Screw drunk drivers. There was a kid I went to school with, we'll call him Jerry, who I thought was a perfectly nice guy. Jerry was kind of known as the flamboyant gay kid in my school. He was good at school, had lots of friends, was well known in the community, and had recently just been accepted to an extremely good college. Just a few weeks ago, Jerry went to a party and intentionally got a 17-year-old kid so drunk and high that he passed out. Once the kid fell asleep, this guy forced himself on him and took pictures of the entire process, while making faces and peace signs at the camera. The kid freaked out when he woke up and realized what happened. The police were immediately called. The police took Jerry's DNA and phone for evidence and quickly found over 150 nude pictures of underage boys from our local high school, and all of the pictures of Jerry forcing himself on this poor kid at a party. Jerry is only 18 and now faces charges for forcing himself on an unconscious victim, forcing himself on a minor, possession of CP, and multiple cases of inappropriate assault. Right now, it looks like he will serve a minimum of 5 years in prison, but it is likely to be more. Apparently more victims have recently stepped forward, so he may be even more screwed than he was before. I can only hope so. People like that deserve life in prison. A few months ago, I had a friend of mine ask me if I wanted to try crack with him. I was busy, so I politely declined. He now has 3 different dealers calling up at the job looking for money. He's totaled 2 cars, only one of which was his. Everyone hates him now because he's always begging for money and lying to everyone, and his mother had him locked up for stealing from her house. We've been watching this dude ruin his life for the past few months, and he won't listen to anyone when we tell him it's obvious his addiction is causing it. At a party with a friend. I didn't know our friends well. Someone offers us heroin and I want to leave. She, on the other hand, has a crush on the guy and wants to stay. She assures me she isn't interested in trying it. I try to talk her out of it and to just leave with me, but no. Plus, I'm starting to get crapped on for being lame and I want out. The last thing she said to me before I left was, "You're a drag and a terrible friend." I told her if worrying for her and my safety made me a drag and a bad friend, that I was okay with it. She died that night. So did he. Batch was laced with fentanyl and they both OD'd. Thank you all. I'm not okay, but those were our last words exchanged. I will always feel there was more that I could have done, the same way I feel that pang when I see a homeless person, or there is some horrible tragedy. Just part of the emotions of life. I know I had her best interest at heart and simply didn't have the life experience to know how to handle it past what I did. I did pretty well considering that. This was almost 10 years ago, and I've been through counseling and know it was not my fault. It's just never ever going to be a situation I can feel totally at peace about, and that's okay too. Some things just suck. This one's a lot, so be ready. It took 14 years to get to the point I could write this TLDR, and I appreciate everyone's concern and comments. Please consider donating to your local domestic violence shelter. I was very lucky to have the military keeping me safe and moving me across the country afterward. Very few women have any resources except the clothes they ran out the house with, assuming they got out alive. Extremely late to the party. Take out $35,000 credit card debt for online adult images. Pay the interest by borrowing from a Chicago gang. Not tell his wife he's bisexual before she finds it. Take out a big insurance policy on her while she's in Iraq thinking she'll die and he'll have $1 million to pay the card and the gang and live well. She doesn't die in Iraq, so he tries to strangle her while she's cooking dinner. He breaks her hand, but she chokes him out and escapes. He tries to fight police. He then tries to punch judges. Got 2 days for that. But his mama knows the judges, so the attempted murder as the domestic violence and the battery charges are dropped. Then he hides in the woods to avoid the process server for the divorce. So he then threatens in writing to kill the now ex-wife's XO and chaplain, except now it's wartime, so they throw him in the brig for military charges instead of civilian charges, so mama can't buy him free. And in the brig, he brags to everyone about how he tried to kill a sailor by flooding a ship's compartment years ago. So he gets charges of 1 sabotage, 2 attempted murders, 2 threatening murder, and all sorts of lesser charges. Dishonorable discharge, and just got out 14 years later. He managed all this in just 4 months. Source: I'm the ex-wife. The fastest way I screwed my life up was drugs. I got in a bad car accident in 2014 and had a bunch of surgeries and spent 5 months in the hospital. Afterwards, I was an opiate-addicted mess who eventually developed PTSD and was prescribed enough alprazolam to effectively erase about a year of my life. I've somehow managed to zombie my way through college and I graduate this May. My GPA sucks and I don't know if I'll be able to get in the nursing program at MUSC. I've been sober for a month now and it felt like getting kicked by a whole football team for the first 2 weeks. I laid in a fetal position on the couch and watched 10 seasons of Cheers on Netflix, ate crackers and ginger ale, and I'm somehow still alive. Thanks for all the support. I really appreciate it. It helps knowing other people have had it worse and everything worked out for them. I put a no opiate directive in with my primary care doctor to stay on the safe side. People in my high school who drove like idiots and got themselves killed. Some of them were drunk, but even when they were sober, they did stupid stuff on the road. One guy got impatient and tried to pass a car and plowed into oncoming traffic and died. I remember on the way to a senior skip day celebration, I struggled to keep up with everyone else because they were all doing 100 in a 60-mile-per-hour zone. One girl got plastered and wrapped her car around a tree. One guy fell out of a car because he was drunk and fooling around. And every freaking time, people shed tears and ask, why did the good die young? As if it isn't going to happen to one of the other dozens of idiots driving like jerkwads a few months later. One guy got impatient and tried to pass a car and plowed into oncoming traffic and died. I saved an idiot from this. We're all stuck behind a slow-moving truck or whatever, and due to oncoming traffic, we can't overtake. This is life. It sucks, but oh well. Then some idiot starts playing chicken and leapfrogging car by car, barely making it back into the right lane before the oncoming traffic that had been braking hard not to hit him zoomed past. I'm the one behind the truck, with massive, long vehicle notices on it, and then I see two things. Him edging to try and leapfrog me and an 18-wheeler in the other lane. Honestly, I could have let him die. Instead, I did perhaps the stupidest thing I've ever done in a car. Right before he pulled out to try and fly past me, I yanked the wheel over and blocked him, brake checked him, and sent him swerving and braking back into the other lane. I got back into my lane about a half second before the 18-wheeler screamed past, leaning on his horn. The dude would have had no chance to pass if he'd been in that lane and would have hit the 18-wheeler head on 100%. As a thank you, he floored it past both me and the truck 10 seconds later on a blind corner, flipping me off as he did so. This was 7 to 8 years ago, and I'm pretty sure he's dead by now. My mom's friend's foster daughter was about a month from graduating high school. She was a straight A student and she had a bright and promising future ahead of her. As far as anyone knew, she was a perfect, good girl. But literally the day she turned 18, she disappeared. Her mom thought the worst, like she'd been kidnapped or killed. She didn't hear from her at all for about 2 weeks. The cops were looking for her but turning up nothing. Then one day, she walks in the front door like nothing happened. As it turned out, on her 18th birthday and the subsequent couple weeks, she dropped out of school, got a really ugly tattoo that covers a large portion of the side of her torso, moved in a house with a couple of guys, which it was later found out that they were having gangbangs with her every day, blew a bunch of money on drugs. Then, when her mother yelled at her for making her worry and for doing so much stupid crap, she freaked out on her mom and left again that same day, disappearing for another several weeks. She came back to collect some of her things and decided she was moving across the country to live with her crackhead real mother that she was taken away from as a baby and never had anything to do with for her entire life. Today, roughly 5 years later, she has 2 babies from different dads, never went to college, and works at Walmart. She could have done anything she wanted, but she decided to screw up everything and go partying instead of just staying in school one more month. This may not be as bad as some of the other answers, but a friend of mine took out a loan for $250,000, I promise I am not exaggerating this number, to pay for her dream wedding to a guy she had known for 3 months. They got divorced after less than a year and she is still in debt from it. The course of a weekend, he met a girl at a party on Friday, put in his resignation at work, and sent an email to his advisor he was giving up his grad program on Saturday and moved across the continent with a girl he met by Monday morning. Last I heard about him, his friends gathered money to fly his homeless butt home 2 years later, and he's been jobless and crashing on people's couches ever since. So, not a permanent mess up, but I've had 4 friends ruin their life over World of Warcraft. Kind of a happy ending, I guess. 4 very close friends of mine all graduated high school at the same time. They all went to college. I joined the Marine Corps. We were all nerds and were all familiar with MMOs and Blizzard. World of Warcraft had really started getting hot, but there was just no freaking way I could play it. But they all started. This was 2006-ish. Fast forward 8 years. I had finished my enlistment and went to college. Me and 2 of those guys are graduating college together with our bachelors. Another one never went back, and the 4th one had to join the Navy because he failed so many classes that his debt was astronomical and he couldn't get back into school. The culprit? World of Warcraft. These guys were putting in 12 hours a day for years on that game. They all failed, all dropped out, all had to pick up the pieces years later after they got their lives back on track. They're all doing well now. None of us, myself included, will touch MMORPGs. Seriously, if you see your life headed down the drain because of an MMO, make changes. These guys lost 4 years of their lives over essentially nothing. People who have visited the US, what is your WTF America story? First night in Los Angeles, watched as a stolen cop car and a million cop cars flew past me down Hollywood Boulevard at 60 miles per hour at 10 p.m. Then I turned and walked back into the Thai restaurant where I watched the fugitive get PIT maneuvered and shot dead live on the news via helicopter chase cam. Dude sitting next to us was excited to tell us we had officially, quote, experienced LA. Over-the-top car chases, action chase cam news, neon lights in Hollywood, an Asian restaurant that made me feel like I was in an art film. He was right. I've told this story on Reddit before, but my biggest WTF was in fall 2005. Google Earth had just come out, and my colleague at the university lab and I were looking at it. She was a blonde bombshell from San Diego, and I'm a portly Indian boy. When I showed her Mumbai, my home city, she was blown away. You have buildings? Look, there's an airport. Oh my god, you have cars? How the heck do you think we got around? I asked. Her reply still rings on in my head. Not walking, not cows, not elephants, not bicycles, not horse-drawn carts. She said camels. If I ever saw a camel in Mumbai, I'd stop everything I'm doing and say, holy crap, that's a freaking camel! Was at an all-you-can-eat buffet with the soft-serve ice cream machine. As kids, we thought we were being little pigs by swirling as high as we possibly could while our parents weren't looking, or they certainly would have stopped us. The guy after us grabbed a full-size drink tumbler and filled it up with ice cream. No shame at all, no childlike glee at making the mother of all Sundays. I suspect now it was something he did regularly. I'm English and visited California about a decade ago. We'd been staying in a small town called Mariposa while we visited Yosemite National Park for a couple of days. My friends had continued their road trip on to Vegas, while I had to head back down to LA and get the plane home. I was waiting for a bus to the station in Mariposa. It was raining, uncharacteristic for April, I was told. A pickup truck pulls up. The first thing I see is a huge dog sitting in the passenger side. Then an old lady, I'm guessing around 60, peers over and asks me, "Where are you heading?" I told her I was going to LA, and she says, "Me too, get in," and starts pushing the dog into the back. Partly out of politeness, but mostly out of curiosity, I jumped in. I think it was around a 3 to 4 hour drive to LA. As we set off, she starts listing all the things we have to do before we get there. Visit a friend to move a trailer, visit another friend who has broken her ankles to feed her dogs, visit a place where she could do her taxes. Quote, that should only take a few hours. It was going to at least double the journey time. Now, in my head, I was saying, heck no, I don't want to do any of that. But I found myself saying, okay. She was super happy. After about half an hour, we arrived at her friend's house. She had 2 huge dogs, and I found myself carrying an industrial-sized bag of dog pellets to fill a huge automatic feeder. While my new lady friend went to use the bathroom, the slightly larger woman that owned the house showed me photos of her daughter and asked me what I thought of her. I said she was pretty, which wasn't a complete lie. She told me she didn't have a boyfriend, and I nodded and smiled awkwardly. Then she said, "So you're going all the way down to LA with old lady friend, are you?" I saw my chance. Actually, I think it might be better if I get the train. Do you know what the next one is?" Slightly large woman checked the train times. Then she hollered out, "Old lady friend, he needs to get the train. The next one's in 20 minutes. Old lady friend rushes, as fast as a 60-year-old can, back into the room, shows no signs of being perturbed, says we better get going then, and we quickly get in the truck. It looks as though we may miss the train. Old lady friend is literally speeding down the road. She turns to me all of a sudden and says, "Has anyone ever told you about Jesus?" I tell her yes, that my parents have told me all about him. That doesn't put her off giving me a little speech, and I don't say anything to stop her. I just smile and thank her. As we get closer to where the station is supposed to be, she winds down her window at some lights and shouts to a surprised dude on the street, "Where's the station?" before accelerating hard and speeding around the bend in the direction the guy pointed to. We get to the station and there's time to spare. There's a bit of a queue at the ticket booth and I say thanks and take my place in line. After a few minutes, I reach the front and buy my ticket. I turn towards the platform and feel a tap on my shoulder. Old lady friend is standing there, apple in hand, a big smile on her face. She presses the apple into my hands and places her hands around mine. She bends her head in prayer. What she said, I can't remember. I was too busy looking at all the people staring at me, an old lady whose head barely reached my chest holding my hands. Amen. Without another word, she walks away. The train arrives, and I leave. I need a movie made about this now. This is such a good story. When I went to Florida, I was stopped by the police for jaywalking. I protested that the road was clear, so therefore safe to cross. He said, I don't know how you do it in your country, but here in the US, we take road safety seriously. Aghast, I explained I was from England, and my only knowledge of jaywalking was from Lethal Weapon 3, and I believed that it was just a made-up law that they used in the movie to sass people. He chuckled and said, that's a great movie. I prefer the first. I agreed and said it was by far the best. After a brief chat about the entire Lethal Weapon saga, he said, in the future, make sure you use the crossings. I agreed, but asked in a pretty decent South African accent, what if I have diplomatic immunity? He chuckled, nodded his head, and pointed to the crossing and said, cross there, enjoy your vacation. And off he went. It was the highlight of my holiday. I went to Disneyland in Anaheim, and it just struck me that there were a large number of disabled people out and about enjoying the rides. I'm from India, where there is no shortage of disabled people, but it was just the sheer number of disabled people that made me extremely happy that the park was accessible to everyone. You done good, America, I said to myself as I ate some horrible, expensive fried thing. I later realized that most of those people were not disabled, but fat people on scooters who did not feel like walking. Where do I sign up? According to New Yorkers, my mother and I can't possibly be Portuguese. Apparently, we're Russian, other than incredibly nice and friendly. I loved it. Korean friend who just got off the plane in Atlanta. So many big fat black women. Yes, he said it loudly and in public. But my favorite was a Japanese fellow who went to a buffet with a group of friends in Vegas. He sits down and his plate looks like a normal little meal. We all have heaps of crap all over ours, and his eyes bug out that we have so much food. I said he's really going to freak out when he realizes this is only our first plate. A couple. I went to university at Cal State Fresno. I was a country boy from Canada. When I was there, the entire downtown of Fresno was boarded up and you did not go there after dark. Actually, anytime. And a full-blown gun/gang fight outside of my apartment in Clovis, a suburb near the university. For a kid from small-town Canada, that was mind-blowing. When I first moved to America, one of the first things I saw after leaving JFK was a homeless man pleasuring himself outside of Union Station. It wouldn't have been that strange, except I had heard a lot of things about New York City from people who had been there, or knew someone who knew someone, etc., and I was worried what I was seeing was just going to be an everyday, everywhere thing all throughout the country. I saw 50 chicken nuggets for $5. There was a place called Norma's in Washington State, somewhere rural. Anyway, it was like a shrine to George Bush. The owner was a guy, and the back of the menu had his face with the quote, "Just call me Norma" on the back. Best burger I ever had, called the George W. Bush burger. Not my story, but my mom's. And instead of visiting, it was more like a people who have immigrated to the US, what is your WTF America story? So it's the early 1980s, and my mom's plane touches down in LAX from Tokyo. As she was collecting her luggage and waiting for her friend to pick her up, a Hare Krishna, which she had never seen before, came up to her and asks her, in English, if she could donate a few dollars. My mom, who only had a few yen and a poor grasp of English, tried to explain to the Hare Krishna that she couldn't understand him and that she had just arrived in the United States. The moment she started talking to him in Japanese, he just gave her some of the money he had and went on his merry way, leaving her at the luggage carousel confused as heck. I asked an old lady if it's true all Americans carry guns. She smiled and pulled a revolver out of her purse. She was a nice lady. I was 12 years old when I spent a month in Minnesota. I remember going WTF, or at least a French equivalent, when we went to Mall of America and I saw the freaking roller coaster inside of it. Edit. I'm not Canadian. I come from the old continent. Back home we would say something like, Putain! Yes, it means unfaithful woman. But I wasn't using curse words when I was 12, so I probably shouted, oh la vache, holy cow. Minnesota is awesome when you're 12. Now that I'm all grown up, I'd like to go to LA or New York City, but nothing beats fishing and horseback riding when you're a preteen. Canadian on tour in America witnessed an enormous man at a Big Boy in Wisconsin pull out 5 jumbo freezer bags and fill them to the brim with sausages from the all-you-can-eat buffet. He hid every bag between the overhang of his belly and sweatpants, then filled a full plate of sausages and proceeded to sit calmly at his table and finish them. Canadian was in a gas station waiting to pay before prepaid took over, and a couple of guys with handguns and holsters were in line in front of me, resting their hands on the guns. Not so much WTF, I knew to expect it, but it's a memory I think of often. Edit. I know nothing about guns or the proper terminology, but I have lots of questions about the exact posture in my inbox, so I'll try to clarify without angering more people. It wasn't a threatening, I'm about to draw my gun pose. It was more of a, this is just a comfy resting place for my hands pose. Like when you hook your thumb on your belt and let it hang there, except near your gun. Anyway, my original point wasn't that I thought they were going to draw. I was just shocked seeing a couple of guns like that. It had never happened before. Me paying at a gas station. Attendant hears I have an accent, smiles at me. You speak English so well. Thanks. Although I should do. I'm from England. Cue confused look. Wait, they... She trailed off. Speak English there? Her colleague stared at her in open-mouthed disbelief and then broke out laughing with the other customers. She looked mortified. To be fair, I felt terrible for her. She was only trying to be friendly to a foreigner. I'm from America, and I have a friend from Australia. It amazes him that there are so many flags everywhere. Apparently, that is a distinct USA thing. He'll make jokes about how we all forget where we are. Was in northern New York, near Buffalo, and a waitress overheard that I was headed back to the Pacific Ocean. She asked where I was going, and I said Vancouver. No, honey. Vancouver is in Canada, and that is on the Atlantic Ocean. I said, Canada is from sea to sea, just like America. She replied, no, that's not right. Only America is from sea to sea. The combination of her being absolutely sure about something and her total ignorance was surprising enough, but the fact that she felt she could basically interrupt our conversation by telling me I am wrong about what ocean I live beside was weird. French ex-exchange teenager in Cali here, summer 97. I was young and missed the field trip bus to Disneyland from San Diego, so I did something pretty stupid. I hitchhiked to go there by myself. Dude who took me looked like a plaincloth cop, but a good buddy. When he heard I was French, he told me to never ever hitchhike in USA because it's pretty dangerous. Plus, people could assume I'm a serial killer. So I boasted, look at you, you don't think I'm a serial killer. I'm not that dangerous looking, or you're a careless. He told me to open the glove box in front of me. There was a supposedly loaded, freaking Desert Eagle inside. He dropped me at the bus station and insisted to give me $10 for a ticket. I had cash, and waited for me to go in the bus. TLDR, still don't know if plaincloth angel or Zodiac killer. Do you have cell phones in Norway? This was in 2012. Kids nowadays get an iPhone and or iPad before they're born. I'm Canadian, and I went down to the US to do a little shopping. I accidentally pulled out some Canadian bills, and the cashier asked why I kept Monopoly money in my wallet. Edit, a lot of people are saying it was just sarcasm. I don't think it was. The cashier looked around 16 years old. She had probably never seen Canadian money before. When I started awkwardly chuckling, she had a puzzled look on her face. But who knows? Maybe she was just really invested in a joke. After moving from Africa as a teen, I am repeatedly asked why I moved to Africa in the first place, to which I replied that I've always lived there. I am also asked, so why are you white? To which I reply, oh my god, Karen, you can't just ask people why they're white. However, when they reply with blank stares, I realize they aren't referencing Mean Girls. Some other questions. So, Africa is one country and all the borderlines are, like, states? Are there, buildings? You guys have memes over there, right? Are you Australian? Australian here. I went to Houston last year and spoke to a girl my age in the airport. We got chatting about uni/college. It was around July, and she asked me if I was on my summer vacation. I casually explained I was on my winter break. She was genuinely confused and did not understand how it was summer in the US but winter in Australia. I tried to explain, but eventually gave up. This next one has layers. I was complimented on my excellent English by a girl from Ohio. I'm Canadian. She thought we all spoke German. Canada, the country best known for speaking German. Not that there's already a country whose language is named after the country it originates from. When I started chatting to a cashier, she squealed and asked where I was from. I told her Australia, and she instantly dumbed down how she spoke. Do y'all speak English down there? I replied sporadically. She laughed and informed me that wasn't a word. When I went to the US the first time and ordered a meal from Burger King, ordering a large fry, Coke, and a Whopper, I was blown away by the size of it all. Each item was larger than the same item back home. I was already like WTF, but then the cashier said I could have a second Whopper for $1. Again, I was like, what the heck? Sign me up! Another time, while I was in Daytona, I went to a restaurant and the woman kept refilling my drink again and again. Being a bit shy, I didn't tell her to stop and expected a bill with $15 for sodas, but then I found out the refills were free. What the heck? Free refills? I'd only seen that at places like Subway, but so many restaurants in the US had free refills. I love the US for restaurants and food in general. The portions are massive and very reasonably priced. Went to Walmart. The fabled creatures there are just as the internet portrays them as. Nonetheless, still mind-blowing. With all the Australian replies in this thread, I can only imagine someone dressed like Steve Irwin running around a Walmart, squatting down in front of the average shopper and exclaiming, "For now there's a beauty! Overweightus americanus, known for their impulsive spending habits. These babies can grow up to 158 kilos!" How spread out everything is. Like, it's pretty much impossible for me to survive without a car, while everywhere I needed to go on a regular basis back in London was in a 10-minute biking distance. Also, the number of pickup trucks people own without needing. It has come to my attention that the city I live in, Jacksonville, Florida, is the widest city in the 48 contiguous states of the US, with a population of just under 1 million. That explains a lot. Not gonna lie, I personally hate needing a vehicle to navigate a city. Like, what's the point of having everything in one spot if you're just going to have to drive to it anyway? It defeats the purpose entirely. Any contractors or civil engineers willing to answer this question in the comments? Let me know. Not mine, but someone posted a while back about his British boss getting pulled over for speeding. As is the tradition in England, he got out of the car to meet the police officer, and it went about as well as you'd expect. Went to a club the other day and got frisked by a door guy wearing a bulletproof vest. That was interesting. Every single one of you jerks asked me where in England I was from. I'm from Australia! Pretty much as far away from England as you can get without leaving the planet! A universal WTF for both foreign and US citizens? The Golden Corral. Everything was submerged in liquid butter. The patrons were larger than some cars. I'd never been out of Australia before. In Australia, only farmers and cops have guns, and some criminals, I guess. So I had never seen a gun that wasn't in a cop's holster in my entire 30-year existence. We go to the US for our honeymoon and have the honor and privilege of visiting a Walmart. The guns are just on the shelf. You can touch them. A fellow Aussie friend who was with us at the time asked the cashier if she could hold one. He looked at her as if she had asked if it was okay to breathe the store's air. "Can I hold one? This big one?" she asked, incredulous. "Sure, if you want to," the guy said, confused and bored at the same time. She picked up this huge gun. Sorry, not a gun guy. Don't know what it was. It was about the size of a shotgun, but was bulkier, and was getting us to take photos of her with it. If I had a gun like that at home and walked outside my house with it, someone would drive past and see me in about 10 seconds. They would call the cops, which would take about 30 seconds. The police station is just up the road, so I estimate a cop car would arrive in about 3 minutes. And it would take about 10 seconds for a cop to ask me politely to jump in his car and come for a nice chat down to the police station. But it'll be fun for about 4 minutes. That thing is $10. That's good. I have a $10 note. I can buy that thing. Oh, wait. I went to Applebee's. Mistake number 1, I guess. I was then served by a nice young lady called Brittany who asked me with a serious face if we have trees in Scotland. I'm from the UK. Lived in the US for about 5 years now. Few things that annoy me. You want to get a loan for a new car? There's a fee for that, on top of the interest. You want to take money out of the ATM? There's a fee for that. You want to exchange some currency? There's a fee for that, on top of the exchange spread. A product has money off? You'll have to send something to receive it. They hope you can't be bothered. Pretty much any service, someone will try to make a few extra dollars off you. Was in Spokane at Silverwood, amusement park, and asked where the washroom was. I was promptly told there were no washrooms in the park. This happened a good handful of times, and it never even occurred to me that I had to say restroom to receive any real help. I'm Canadian and have visited the United States multiple times and have had an overall enjoyable experience on each one. I wouldn't blame this on America, but I saw a fat, bald, middle-aged man standing on the side of a Pennsylvania highway with bunny ears. I'm sure this happens in Canada too, but this is the first time I've seen something like this. Easter Bunny has had a rough few years. People just don't care about Jesus coming back anymore.
What idiot idea at your work caused a mass walkout? They laid off half the company with no warning. This included a gentleman who was less than a year from retirement and had been there for more than 35 years. The company was shocked when half the remaining people abandoned ship shortly afterwards. The company consistently outpaced competing firms and found itself emerging as one of the industry-leading agencies. This was also a California tech firm, so shorts, flip-flops, beers at lunch, getting high on the roof were all pretty common. But we were rapidly growing, and the atmosphere and location made us a hot ticket for talent. Anyway, the CFO and CMO cashed out, and the CEO decided to completely remodel the company by making it far more corporate. On top of all of this, they implemented unattainable goals and removed our work-from-home policy. The final straw was they removed our rather generous vacation policy and replaced it with unlimited vacation, which was a facade for, you can take as much vacation as you want if we approve it. They didn't approve much, by the way. Like a quarter of the company quit and immediately landed at better jobs. Also, profits tanked. Our company is doing incredible. Let's change everything. Task failed successfully. Turned out our owner was keeping the social security money taken from our paychecks. And yes, he was caught. Restructure of the way we're paid. What I used to do involved about 40% client interaction, 20% team and coworker interaction, and 40% paperwork and case coordination stuff. Based on what we do, that means about 40% of the time is technically billable, and there are only really sticky rules for what is and isn't billable. So logically, we're being paid on a salary model. Q management saying we can only make money for the time we have that's actually billable. A quarter of the department up and quit. 2 of us on the same day. The owner died and his idiot son took over and decided that the company didn't make him enough money and started implementing cost-cutting measures like turning off the AC in the building. Yes, well, employees don't need our help maintaining their body temperature to be able to do their jobs. You know what? I hear that most people's immune systems can resist a degree of bacteria, so let's stop using treated water in the water system too. I think I've just summarized the thinking style of a new owner of a previously successful business. The owners retired. They were wonderful people, both very sweet, but kept the place running like a well-oiled machine. They took pretty good care of us and their restaurant. When they left, they gave the place over to their nephew, who at the time was a busboy and waiter. Kinda standoffish, didn't really interact with us too much, a bit lazy at times, but for the most part, did his stuff and went home. He seemed okay. That is, until he got the power of being the owner. He fired 4 people, including 2 of the 4 cooks and 2 of the 3 dishwashers, literally the same day, on a Friday night just before the dinner rush, all because he didn't like their attitude. He refused to allow people to take vacation that they'd already requested, and got confirmed by the original owners. He'd change the schedule randomly without telling anyone, and then scream at people when they missed a shift or came in late because of it. He'd refuse to replenish the kitchen until we were literally out of things, then take forever to put in the orders. He showed up randomly and would drink at the bar, for free of course because he was the owner, and then bring in all of his buddies to drink with them, and together they'd get way out of hand and grab at women and try to start fights. Within the first month of him being the owner, over half of the staff had quit, usually walking out literally in the middle of their shifts after being screamed at, as they'd basically throw down their aprons and tell everyone else that they were so sorry but they couldn't do it anymore. After the last cook, this big guy who usually kept the kitchen laughing and running at a decent pace, started crying in the middle of his shift and dropped everything he was doing after the boss came and yelled at him for being slow and making slop, just walked out, the rest of us bailed along with him. 4 months later, the place was closed. His aunt and uncle were absolutely furious and devastated that he'd run the business they'd built up over 30 years into the ground. When they tried to reach out to find out what had happened, because they'd moved out of state, they were absolutely horrified to hear how he had behaved towards the staff. But by that point, it was too late to do anything about it. But on the whole, yeah, they shouldn't have just up and left to retire without giving him a few months in training wheels to make sure that he could actually hack it. Anytime I've seen a mass exodus, it's because of poor management. I've never seen it organized, just a bunch of employees independently deciding to quit in the same month because the management was so bad. I used to work at McDonald's and we had a terrible manager who hated a lot of people working there. Everyone else hated him too, but no one wanted to call him out on his crap and quit. I was the first to do it because I requested 2 weeks off in August of that year, about 3 months in advance. My family likes to plan our summer vacations early on. When August came around, he had my schedule set up for all of August off except for those specific 2 weeks. There was no way he could have misinterpreted my request. When I got my schedule, I stormed into the restaurant, called him out on everything, and then quit on the spot. About 2 weeks after that, I heard from one of my work friends that 5 other people had had enough and quit as well. I kind of felt good about being the first. New management. In a month, 4 kitchen staff quit, leaving me to be the only original kitchen staff hire from the previous manager. This new person completely changed the vibe of the workplace. No one was happy, no one felt like talking or listening to music or being friendly. It was robotic. When I was 16, I worked in the concessions stand at a minor league baseball stadium. Minimum wage at the time was $5.15 an hour. This job paid $8, and it was always in the evenings, so it was perfect work for a high school student. The only bad thing was our management was terrible. The main manager would throw toddler tantrums about once a shift over stupid bullcrap like not ordering enough of a specific beer. She did the ordering, by the way, or running out of pre-cut lemons for tea. One night the stadium was running a promotion and it was incredibly busy, easily 2 to 3 times the normal volume of customers. We were already working our butts off handling multiple roles, each with absolutely no downtime. Although we all cleaned as we worked, nobody had a chance to do thorough cleaning for the whole shift because of the never-ending horde of hungry baseball fans. The manager showed up 3 or 4 hours late, as per usual, and threw the biggest fricking temper tantrum over the unswept floor. Finally, she announces, "Listen up, you lazy Fs. Minimal work gets minimal pay. Everyone's being paid minimum wage tonight because you slobs won't clean up anything." Both of our bartenders and the bar back quit on the spot, which caused a chain reaction. We all took off our aprons and hats to leave. She blocked the exit and was red in the face from screaming, so one of the cooks climbed out of one of the big serving windows where we serve customers. So I did the same and most of the staff followed. Bear in mind that this all happened in front of about 200 customers. Of course, my final paycheck got lost, so I had to file a wage theft complaint with the Texas Workforce Commission. Filed the complaint, submitted my clock-in and clock-out receipts for the week, we got paid weekly, and previous pay stubs to verify my pay rate. After about 3 weeks, I was contacted by the person handling my claim, saying that my previous employer had mailed me a check for the whole amount I was owed plus a penalty. The check arrived within a few days, and the penalty was $25 if I recall correctly. Later that year, the same employer refused to provide my W-2 for tax filing, so I filed a complaint with the IRS and used my pay stubs with a special form to complete my taxes. I don't know what happened regarding that, but that lady's life imploded for non-work-related reasons. She got caught cheating on her husband, then got caught faking cancer for sympathy. Who would have guessed that someone so completely and utterly incapable of being a decent human being at work would also show the same decorum to her partner and society at large? A fate well-deserved, hopefully being knocked down a few pegs will give her some empathy. I did landscape construction. The cheap owner kept taking bigger and bigger projects while never hiring more help. We were all overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious as hell. One of our foremen quit, and I followed suit a few days later. 2 more guys quit the next day. He was down to 3 guys for the obscene amount of work he wanted to do. Of course, everything got way behind schedule, but he was convinced it wasn't his fault at all. He went out of business less than a year later. I was hired by the new owners to replace the existing manager. I was under the impression that he was moving on to another job somewhere else. So, after about 4 days, I ask him where he's headed and if he's excited. He just looks at me blankly and says, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm just training you as the assistant manager, right?" The look I gave him must have been a great tip-off because he got up and walked into one of the new owner's offices. After about 30 seconds, they were screaming at each other, and then he just storms out of the office, grabs his stuff, gives me the finger, and leaves. Over the next few days, I was trying to calm things down with the employees. They're not faulting me, but now they have a very bad taste in their mouths about the new ownership. Over about a 7 to 10 day period, my team shrank from 15 people down to 3. I hobbled along the best I could while we tried to hire new people, but the new owners were offering so little we had trouble finding them. After 3 months or so of that, I started to get fed up and overwhelmed, and when the owners started to get on to me about missed deadlines, I'd had it. We were still only at 5 people, 2 of whom were brand new and still training. They didn't allow me to refuse work or push deadlines out, and they expected the same output as a 15-person team. So, after my 3rd day in a row of being berated for missing a deadline that was impossible to make, I quit. Hiring you to replace him without telling him is evil. Hiring you to replace him without telling you they haven't told him is dumb. At that point, there isn't much to do except try and make the best of it, but I'm glad you were able to get out of there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm the manager of a retail store and I'd found out the cashier was stealing product by scamming reward card benefits. I came up with a detailed incident report to present this to the employee, and I was under the assumption it was just her. After I confronted her in a reasonable manner, she freaked out and got really angry and quit on the spot. She was using fake accounts instead of using a customer's reward card to get herself points and redeem them for products and gift cards. So, the customers weren't getting the points they were owed, which was a headache for me if they notice and complain. The next day, every other cashier called me and quit, and after thinking, what the frick just happened? I found out they were all in on it and were using this lady's fake card on their shifts as well. So I'm down 4 cashiers and I have 1 left. The same day, my last remaining cashier disappeared for 20 minutes. Turned out she was in the bathroom with another employee doing the nasty. She quits because her dad's a cop and doesn't want to find out she got fired for this, and she also asked me if she should go to urgent care because she didn't take out her tampon before they did it and she couldn't find it. The guy also quit because he didn't care and was moving anyway. I was down to literally managers only. So, the first part is the mass walkout and the last part was just for, can you believe this crap? I was working for a very large IT company before the tech bubble burst, and we had a meeting with our new director and the VP. They were tired of people complaining about things that should be changed at the job and how they managed people. So, they sat around 200 of us down in our auditorium, and the director said she didn't want to hear any more complaints on how she was running things, and if we didn't like it, there was the door, and that there was no way we'd leave such a great job. Well, there was a mass exodus and probably close to 50 people left within 2 months. She and the VP were reorged and given 0 reports, and they were gone after a round of layoffs happened shortly after. I worked at Wendy's and one of the regional managers started running a store because they couldn't and wouldn't find new managers to replace the old ones. Well, anyways, this guy practically ran the place into the ground. Before he started running the store, most everyone liked working there as it was a good environment. A few months later, a couple of people quit because of him. And one day I rolled in at 9 to help open the store and he came out to my car as soon as I parked. I was 5 minutes early and usually just sat in my car until 9. He tells me, "Hey, you need to start early because the 3 openers just quit on me." We managed to get the store open and had a number of people from other stores come in to help run the place until the people from the next shift came in. A couple of days later I heard the full story of what happened from a coworker. The regional manager was supposed to be at the store at 7 or so, and the openers 30 minutes later. He didn't actually show up until 8:30. So when the openers, already being annoyed at having to be at work really early and not being on the clock, saw the manager roll in and knew it was going to be an awful shift, they all decided that they were done with him and just quit right there. So at least 6 people quit because of him by the time I left the place. Probably more left after me. Cancelled all raises and bonuses for everyone except the CEO, his wife, who was financial and HR, and his son, who was utterly useless IT, in a year where we had record profits and brought in almost double the clients, on top of announcing they aren't looking to hire more people when we were already overwhelmed. Good part about it was when the majority of us quit, they lost almost every single client shortly afterwards to their competitors, and the company is now defunct. Haha, get wrecked, jerks. I can almost get making cuts like that if a company is bleeding, but if it's doing well and the board, or even more offensively, just the employees hired based off their families are getting raises, then the company deserves to die. Worked at a data company. The guys in the sales department messed around all day. They'd be literally in the parking lot drinking beer and racing RC cars. When it came to handling accounts and clients, they frequently gave away free accounts in order to retain customers and make their own sales numbers look good, and somehow they got away with it. Meanwhile, there were dozens of programmers and database nerds working tirelessly behind the scenes to integrate a bunch of complicated data and make it easy to access via the website. Yearly holiday announcements came around and upper management decided to send the entire sales team to Hawaii for an all-expense-paid vacation. When the furious developers asked why they were just taking the sales team, the confused CEO said, literally, "Well, I guess we could ask the sales team to pick one person from each department who helped them the most this year and take them too." The programmers, engineers, and database people were livid and walked out in droves. Gee, I wonder why the company tanked. Several years ago, I worked in a mental health center. We worked primarily with kids. It was time for the center to renew their certification. Instead of keeping up with everything that needed to be done over the course of 5 years, the proper procedures were ignored. In this couple of months before recertification, the administration made us sit through a ridiculous amount of training on things that would have been covered in training such as IDOWorkHereLady laws and identifying people who were mistreating children. Then came our paperwork. Our center encouraged us to do things that weren't exactly covered by Medicaid or approved through certification. For example, taking kids to the park isn't allowed, but guess where they instructed us to take these kids so that they didn't disturb the therapists working? I had to go back and edit 5 months' worth of documents to get rid of the evidence. The kicker was that the bathrooms were supposed to have a log of when it was cleaned. An administrator perfectly forged the signatures of multiple employees. I don't think they would have gone to the effort just for a bathroom log, so what else were they forging our signatures on? The potential risk of being charged with Medicaid fraud was too high for me. I quit, as did many others. The school district I sometimes sub in had a big round of hiring. A bunch of building substitutes applied for the jobs, and only about half of them got interviews. Of the subs that got interviews, myself included, the only ones who made it past the screening interview was a relative of a current employee. The rest of us subs apparently weren't the right fit. The real reason is that there's a substitute shortage and they don't want to lose any of us. Not a single sub who wasn't a relative was hired for one of over a dozen teaching jobs. Many of the building subs just aren't coming back next year. Many years ago in high school, I worked at a movie theater. The place was pretty poorly run from the moment I started there. We never got paid on time, and management was basically a bunch of lazy idiots who sat in the office talking all day and never actually did any managing. It would have been hard for things to have gotten any worse, but after a couple of months they brought in new management who seemed to want to make it their personal mission to run the theater as poorly as possible. They first decided to implement a new policy requiring all projectionists to wear ties, despite the fact that projectionists are never seen by the public, not to mention the tiny detail that projectionists work around giant, rapidly spinning objects that a tie could get caught in. Management refused to reconsider the policy, and every single projectionist quit as a result. They then decided that the door people, of which I was one, who were always scheduled 7 days a week, would now only be scheduled on weekends, and refused to reassign any of us to concessions on the weekdays so we wouldn't lose hours. As a result, almost every single door person quit, including me. After that, they started imposing impossible cleanliness standards on concessions, things like requiring them to scrape popcorn kernels out of the cracks in the trim behind the popcorn machines. Concessions was there until 5 a.m. every single day trying to meet their standards. Most of the concession people quit as a result. By my count, the theater went from a staff of about 50 to a staff of about 12 in 3 weeks. I swung by about a month after I quit and found out the entire management staff had been fired and replaced yet again by an entirely new one, ones who actually seemed to be running the theater properly. My best guess is that the previous management had been told to whip the theater into shape, and they were idiots who had no idea how to effectively do that. Our boss had a meeting and announced a new policy that all salaried employees had to work a minimum of 45 billable hours per week because of the increased project load we had. I pointed out to a few co-workers that our employment contracts specified 37.5 hours per week and that I'd be adhering to that policy. Well, about a week later, I was laid off due to a lack of projects. I was happy to go, and at least 2 others left voluntarily within the week. The job I found next was much better and wasn't run by someone quite so clueless about how to treat people. The company changed from 5 to 8 hour shifts to a 12-hour shift rotation. Most of the people that quit were the ones that were on straight day shift and didn't want to or couldn't work night shifts. Yeah, try telling every employee with a family or kids to collect from school that they can no longer do so. Good luck, let me know how that goes. Jeez, what were they thinking? Worked in construction as part of an HSE team. The chief engineer was angry that the job was taking slower because of the HSE, especially safety procedures. We had a couple of lost time incidents at this point, and just a week before a guy almost died, but he was still pretty angry about the delays, so he gathered everyone into a room to say, "You're not here to do your jobs, you're here to do what I tell you." 20 people asked to quit on the spot. Frickin' C-word. Working at a local restaurant that had recently changed owners. Multiple issues came up, difficulty getting off for important things, him hiring people to work in the kitchen who were bad at their job but cheaper ingredients, as well as the owners just kind of sitting around and drinking while they're not doing much. Things were tense, and after a couple of months we were really just hanging in there because we liked each other. The previous owners were a sweet old couple that set a great vibe. I know some others and I were already looking for jobs. Anyways, there was a young mother who waited tables there and really needed the money. She couldn't afford to be between jobs. One night, she got a call that her grandmother had had a severe stroke and was unresponsive and wasn't expected to make it through the night. She asked to get off and start her 3-hour drive to Dallas. The manager says of course, but the owner says no. Manager and owner got into a verbal fight in the back. The waitress ended up pleading her case, crying. The manager said if the owner wouldn't let her go, he was done. The owner ended up firing them both on the spot. Within the next 15 minutes, everyone who hadn't been a recent hire ended up walking out of the building. 7 of us walked out. A waitress, a cook, a dishwasher, and the busboy stayed. I actually never followed up to see if they finished the shift, but I think they did. I and one other were the last of the originals there. We banged out the last couple of tickets we had that were placed before the walkout. Not their fault, and I do take some pride in my work. The quality and attendance dropped for a year before the owner sold to a different guy with actual restaurant experience. The original couple returned to reopen the restaurant, and it's still going today. I'm not going to name names. There's no point, just let sleeping dogs lie. The waitress did make it in time to say goodbye before her grandmother passed. ICE contacted the in-house temp service, questioning them about illegal workers. Over 20 people mysteriously disappeared at lunchtime. A couple of months later, most of them were back, with different names. They decided after 6 years it was time to do a substance test. Even lost the CEO in that great idea. How did you catch your spouse cheating without even suspecting anything? Dating this girl a few years back, and I became really good friends with her brother just because he appreciated my help during a difficult time for their family. Their father had abruptly passed away. 2 years into the relationship, the brother contacts me and asks to meet up for coffee and a serious conversation. Apparently, he caught his own sister with another guy, a mutual friend of ours, and this crap had been going on for like a year. As soon as he found out, I was told. I broke up with her. I'm still friends with the brother. Go figure. I came back from a trip 4 hours early. My wife was supposed to be at work still. I opened the front door to see her sitting completely undressed from the waist up on the couch making out with a coworker. He ran out the door and she ran into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on that couch for about an hour because I couldn't think what else to do. Finally, I just stood up and left so she could come out of the bathroom and put a shirt on. I'd been on the road for work. It was supposed to be 10 days. I got home a day early. I had a friend pick me up at the airport to surprise my wife and 2 kids, 2 years and 8 months old respectively. Walked into my ex and her coffee friend snuggling on the couch with my kids in the same room. I was livid, and of course she denied everything. We split up weeks later. 2 weeks ago, I sent a message to a mutual friend asking to borrow a router. He didn't answer, but no worries, he lives nearby. I'll just stop by and grab it. I pull up to his house and start heading down the driveway. He has a long country driveway, so it's a few seconds before I see my car already there. I was in my company vehicle, by the way. My heart began to sink, but they're friends and business partners, so maybe it's nothing. I got out of my van and looked up to see the other guy shirtless in his bedroom. At this point, my heart is down on my stomach and I'm visibly shaking. I go in and immediately head upstairs. He's alone and now fully clothed. I say, I came to borrow the router. Also, have you seen my wife? The car is here. He then proceeds to give the worst improv I've ever heard. No, she was, here at some point though. Whatever, I knew she was there, I just wanted to hear him admit it. I went down, took the router, and headed back to the van where I finally encountered my wife, undressed from the waist up, trying to sneak around the side of his house. And now, here I am, on the internet, submitting the story of my heartbreak. Oh goddamn, I don't know what's worse, the heartbreak or complete fail at concealing what was going on. I don't know what level of improv you were expecting from the guy though. Shirt-eating lizards invaded and your wife took shelter here. Thank God you're unharmed. I think we just fought them off. I hope you didn't give that router back. Her phone got a text from her friend who was in the kitchen with her. So, I assumed one of them sent it to me, opened her phone to see a man's anatomy. I didn't think her female friend had one of those. Now I'm divorced and just don't trust texts from friends. A wild eggplant has appeared. It was super effective. It destroyed the relationship. I caught my ex thanks to frickin' Pokemon Go of all things. She mentioned Pokemon Go was using lots of her data. I explained that in her settings she could see how much data an app was using. I proceeded to show her and proved to her it wasn't by pointing out Tinder was using much more data. It was sad but also funny the way that it went down. I found my wife's notebook. Written on the first page was a 10-step plan detailing how she was going to leave me for another guy. I turned it into 1 step. I got a new job with a cell phone company. Free phone for me, $15 a month for her. First bill comes in with call detail. She was on the phone an hour a day with this number while supposedly at work. I call, a guy answers. I hang up, I ask her, she lies and said it was a girlfriend of hers. I told her I know she's lying, and I call it again. A guy answers. F you, Brooke. One night she told me not to come over because she wasn't feeling well. But then my sister wanted this hoodie back that she had borrowed, so I thought I'd stop over with chocolate and a Slurpee. I knocked on her door. She came to the upstairs window with only a blanket wrapped around her. I thought I told you not to come over. My sister needs her hoodie. Who's that? Says some male voice from her bedroom. I see how it is. I'll talk to you tomorrow, she says. Probably not. Have a good one. After a week visiting friends in London, England, I flew back to Canada. I was supposed to do something with another group of friends when I got back, but plans fell through, so I drove the 4 hours home to the apartment we shared. She expected me home at 6 p.m. I'd been up for 30 straight hours and I got home at 6 a.m. wanting nothing more than to fall into bed. There was an extra set of feet attached to some jerk when I walked in. Girlfriend ran over her phone by accident and destroyed the screen. She asked me to back up all of her stuff and transfer it to her new Pixel. I used that backup tool that captures all sorts of dirty messages and undressed photos with another guy. We had a linked Apple account. We both had the Find My iPhone app. Figured out what all the late nights at work really were. One of my former co-workers loaded in an SD card with a scanned project file on it. He put it into the conference room PC, and we were treated to very compromising pictures of his wife with another man. We were just stunned. This was in a senior budgetary meeting with the outside accountants and auditors, and he was sitting right there, and we were looking at his wife and another guy going at it. I reached over and shut the projector off. Nobody said anything. He got up and walked out and drove off in his car, left his phone and laptop sitting on the table. He wound up driving to his parents' house 3 states away and was gone for a week. A friend of mine literally walked in on his wife and another guy doing it on their sofa. I guess he yelled, "What the F?" and ran out. Facebook was a real crap show for a few days, and she even had the gall to blame him back. The old, "It's your fault I cheated." Luckily, there were no children in that marriage and not much money to fight over. My dad told me the story a few years back. So, some of my mum's family were visiting from out of town and they'd planned a night at the bingo, which my dad couldn't attend because he was working 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. He finished work early and on his way home, he saw my babysitter on the street. Aren't you meant to be with my kid?" "No, your wife called me at around 8 p.m. saying she wasn't feeling well and that she'd stay at home." My dad drove home, tried the front door, locked, no lights. He entered the house by the basement door, went up the stairs, and heard them a few feet away. My mum and my mum's cousin. 2 years later, he almost left her with me in tow, but stayed so that I could have a normal life. Most of the time, I wish he'd left because he wouldn't have had to work 90 to 100 a week to avoid being home, and I would have been happier. For those who were wondering, my mum had a long-time affair with her cousin, starting before she met my dad. She wasn't happy in the marriage, I think, but my dad was a good catch. Yes, I'm sure he is my dad, because we look so much the same, and yes, they are still together, and after a year of being angry, I decided to let go, because their relationship has nothing to do with me. I'm just sad for both of them. I returned from work on Christmas Eve. We had tickets to a festival which started the day before New Year's Eve, and I couldn't find the tickets anywhere after seeing them the month before. I decided to double-check the trash before we put it out for collection. I found a used Johnny. We lived on our own. I did the math. Walked in on my girlfriend while she was doing it with another guy. "What are you doing here?" she says. "You gave me a key, remember? I ended up not working today and wanted to surprise you." 15 years later, she reaches out and leaves me a message that she'd like to talk. I figure she's doing some 12-step thing or something and wants to make amends. Nope, she wants to try and sell me on Amway. I woke up in the night with a bad feeling, got out of bed and found my brother railing my wife. So, did the bad feeling go away after that? Or was it still there? You can't just leave out the conclusions like this. I'm kidding, of course. I'm sure there were a great number of very distinct feelings in the minutes, hours, and months that followed. Long story short, I suspected something for a few months. Like an idiot, I opened her phone while she was asleep and I found exactly what I was looking for, like you always do when searching through someone else's phone. Even though I had all the evidence and texts right there to see, she still lied about it multiple times to my face. She eventually admitted to it, but downplayed it heavily. She then tells me that about 2 nights ago he asked her out on a date, and she said, "I had to say no," and was visibly sad about it. In the process of getting a divorce now. Hurts like hell. I went home and my husband wasn't there, which was weird for him at 8 p.m. when an hour earlier he had told me he was going home. I had a gut feeling, went to one of our female friends, who he claimed was like a sister to him's, apartment, and his truck was there. I knock. No answer. Tried the door, and it's unlocked. Walked into the living room and nobody was there. I hear noises in the bedroom. I walk in, and lo and behold, there they are. Tried to make it work over the next couple of months, but I just can't get past it. I didn't even want him to touch me. We divorced 4 years ago. After a night of trying to keep up with my ex and her co-workers drinking, I called it a night. They stopped talking a few minutes later, and the dog scratched at the door. I let the dog in, and I saw them just making out on the couch. I watched for 10 minutes before they noticed me. They were taking their clothes off by then, and he was touching her favorite spots like he knew them well. There was no denying it by then. I'm glad I knew. A tense conversation followed with the two of them. He left, very drunk, on a very cold night. She got a ride to her aunt's place and begged me to go look for him in the cold. A close friend had an affair with another close friend and got caught because she lost an earring in the bed. After the entire blowout of a friend group and lots of shaming on both of them, she says he committed the unspeakable act on her and everyone was stunned and didn't know what to do. So, to prove that he didn't do that to her, he had to show his wife and the police home security footage of the woman astride him like a horse while he was handcuffed. So, he cheated and was accused of an awful crime and then got to top it off by showing his wife a video of him with another woman. There was a lot of hesitation after her first accusation. We didn't really have the time to process that this lifelong friend of ours was the worst kind of person, before it was all thankfully set straight and she started backpedaling. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Me and my girlfriend were long distance and she had a habit of going quiet sometimes. She had been texting me for the last few weeks but had made excuses not to come visit. I went to a party that my friend had organized. I met a friend of his who told me he had a new girlfriend. I was surprised he hadn't mentioned her, so I asked who she was. This lady introduced me to my girlfriend. She told everyone that we'd broken up and had been dating my friend for about a month. She didn't bother to tell me. Her phone went off and she asked me what it said. I looked at it and it said, "I want to bend you over and spank you." We were engaged and he had a drinking problem. He was blacked out drunk, accidentally butt-dialed me, and I listened to the whole thing. Only to find out after that it was with a working girl. Not me, but one of my best friends. His girlfriend snuck a guy into their bedroom apartment whilst he was playing Xbox in the living room. I heard the argument through the mic after he heard a noise coming from the bedroom. He kicked her out and continued playing with us. To the people saying my buddy deserved it because he was addicted to video games, I don't know where you got that from. He only plays when there's a bit of spare time. She's just a crap person. After he caught them in the act and kicked her out, he came back onto the mic to tell us what had happened and to get off the game. We encouraged him to stay on and talk everything through with us. We were in different countries at the time and couldn't see him in person because we were worried about him. Their relationship had been a little rocky, but who'd guess that someone would cheat, especially in the next room? He's a great guy who didn't deserve to have that happen to him. He's now in a healthy relationship with a wonderful lady. Didn't happen to me, but my closest friend growing up. He was making out with his girlfriend in the back of her car, which at the time she only had for a week, and he put his hand on the back of the car somewhere between the back of the headrest and the rear windshield. I guess the opposite of a dashboard? Anyway, he put his hand in a semi-fresh load of someone else's splooge. And her answer was that her gum must have flown out of her mouth and landed back there, and then the sun melted it into a splooge-like substance. My first long-term girlfriend and I were going to the same college. I got accepted but had to start the semester after she did, meaning we'd be slightly long distance for a few months. It wasn't too bad because we were only about 2 hours apart, so it was pretty easy for me to visit, but our relationship did struggle a bit. I remember one night I got a phone call from her, and when I picked up, it was obvious it was a butt dial. I could hear her talking to some guy, but I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. I called her and she picked up, and I asked what was up. She said she was in bed and about to go to sleep. I told her about the butt dial and she said it was her friend Jack, who I met asking to borrow something. I thought that was odd, but I brushed it off. A couple of weeks later, I was up there visiting her and I met a bunch of really cool people, including this guy, Luke. After I got back from visiting, I got a Facebook message from him saying, "Look man, I hate to be the one to say this, but I think you're an awesome guy and you don't deserve to have this happen to you. She's been cheating on you with this guy pretty soon after she started here." I was devastated, but I had to hear it from her, so I called her and asked, "Are you cheating on me?" She gave a heavy sigh and said, "Well, at least I don't have to lie anymore." That guy's voice I'd heard wasn't Jack, it was the guy she was cheating on me with. I just trusted her so much that I took her word for it. Even though it was painful, I was grateful to Luke for sending me that message. What's funny is that most of the people I met up there that were her friends sided with me after the breakup. So when I started going there next semester, I had a group of friends to support me, and most of them are still very close friends of mine to this day. I went to the bathroom while we were playing board games. When I came back, everyone laughed at all of my moves. She had looked at my hand of clue cards. It made it really hard to trust her during the group whoopee that followed. You know what? I think you might have slightly misunderstood the intention of this question, but your story did technically answer one of the possible meanings, so we'll take it. Hope that it didn't make the sweaty 8-hour after-party gyrations too awkward for everyone else. My boyfriend finally convinces me to get another girl involved in our bedroom activities after months of begging. I finally agree and our mutual friend comes over. Things get hot and heavy, and when he starts doing the deed with her, he moans, "Damn, you feel even better than usual." And everyone freezes. He tries to tell me that he was thinking about my hoo-ha while using hers and that it just felt different, but she felt so guilty that she confessed on the spot and begged me to forgive her. We don't really talk anymore, but last I heard she had been dating my ex for over a year. My wife had been texting a lot and was very evasive when I inquired about it, though she smirked when she thought it was making me jealous. Yeah, she's that kind of person. Turns out she had left her email logged into my cell phone, so I noticed she had a weekend Airbnb trip to a place that was one state away. We were living in different states at the time, and the Airbnb really seemed to be of the quiet romantic getaway type. Total occupancy 2. Well, I thought, that was fairly suspicious. So I monitored her Airbnb page, which was easy since we were friends on Airbnb, figuring that the owner might leave a comment about how great she was as a guest, which it turned out she did. Except the review went something like, "Wife's name and guy not named me were wonderful guests," and so on. Yeah, so anyone want to guess what the conditional probability is of a weekend trip involving infidelity? I'm pretty sure it's rather high. My wife apparently panicked and asked Airbnb to remove the review and altered her name on the site, and then finally, having failed to get the review taken down, deleted her account. I eventually asked her about it during a counseling session, and she had a ready-made defense about how she had meant to take the trip with another coworker, but that person's car broke down. So, the guy's name ended up tagging along since he was that coworker's boyfriend, and they all stayed there together. But he signed the guest book, hence a totally honest mistake. You know what? In hindsight, I'm pretty sure she wasn't telling the full truth. We are not still married. My ex-wife was an alcoholic. Like, she had it real bad. One time I got home from my night shift a little early and, you guessed it, she was drunk. Well, I was in the mood and she's usually drunk when we do it anyway, so what the hell? I came on to her. So, we were doing it and it's dark and she says, "You need to hurry up." So I ask, why? "He's gonna be home soon." Who? "My husband, you fricking idiot." Yeah. So anyway, I get off her and hop out the bed and flip on the light, and this witch looks absolutely baffled. She's really drunk and totally dumbfounded. I ask her, "Who did you think was doing the deed with you?" "What? Who did you think was doing the deed with you?" "What are you talking about?" "Never mind, I'll talk to you about it in the morning." "I'm not drunk." Yeah. She didn't even know what the frick I was on about. So I went to bed on the couch and I was sitting there going over stuff in my head and I hear her come down the stairs. She goes into the kitchen and I hear a drawer shut. A few seconds later, she's standing over me with a fricking knife. I promptly take the knife from her and tell her to go to bed, which she obliges without saying a single word. I grab the kids, put them in the car and drive to my mum's house where we spend the night. She starts blowing up my phone at 10 a.m., frantic that she doesn't know where the kids are. We have a mini-intervention, she promises to go to AA, I attempt to erase the entire night from my memory, which didn't work obviously, and about a month later she hasn't held up her AA agreement, which has pretty much gone back to her old ways. I come home from work and I see a fricking LA Dodgers hat on my couch. So who was over? I ask. Nobody. Are you sure? Yeah. Don't frickin' bullcrap me. Who was over here? Are you calling me a fricking liar? Yeah, I am, because someone left their fricking hat on my fricking couch. At this point, she concocts some stupid story about a neighbor coming over to borrow something. I knew she was lying. At this point, I'd pretty much given up on the marriage, but I didn't know what to do. I was afraid that if I divorced her, she'd somehow get the kids. There was a lot more effed up stuff happening over the next month or so, including her making up a story about Mexicans jumping her, my neighbor calling child protection services, me catching her actually kiss a guy, and 2 junkies admitting to doing the deed with her at the same time. Then one day in July of 2008, I asked her to have a seat. I told her I was filing for divorce, she put up a fight, but I won full custody. I started dating other people, and I've been with my new wife for 9 years now. The end. I found out that my boyfriend who I dated from ages 15 through 18 had been cheating on me when, upon walking into the apartment he shared with his mother and 2 elementary-aged sisters, the younger sister asked me, "When did you leave?" I asked her, "When was I here?" She responded, "You were here all night. I could hear you talking to him." I'd not been there for 2 days at that point. I asked him what she was talking about and he blew bubbles for a few minutes before confessing. Good riddance. He changed his phone password. I left it for a few months until something just wasn't sitting right in my gut. I unlocked his phone with my thumb and I didn't even have to look. There was a messaging app open with a girl he was meeting the next day. I sent him to work without confronting him. I reset passwords through a long chain of emails to finally access the one associated with the messaging app. Lo and behold, he was sending approximately 10,000 emails per year for the last 4 years of our relationship. He was living a whole second life and hiding it from everyone. Our relationship had never appeared stronger, and we'd been seeing a therapist to work on strengthening our communication for 8 months, once a week. Clearly, he was hiding his issues from the therapist as well. At the time, I felt like it ruined my life. I remember thinking very clearly, what did I do to deserve this? And when I thought that, something inside of me just snapped. I calmly went and brought a giant coffee and cardboard boxes. I packed up all of his things before he was home from work and changed the locks. The end. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.